She did not cry at the funeral, not because the grief had failed to arrive, but because tears required a kind of surrender she could no longer afford. Her father had been the last person in the family who believed in her without conditions, who asked about her children by name rather than as evidence of poor decisions, who saw her as more than the sum of her mistakes. Now that voice was gone, replaced by the careful distance of relatives who attended out of obligation rather than love. The rain fell steadily on the Seattle suburbs that morning, turning the cemetery grass into something soft and treacherous. Sarah Mitchell stood beneath a black umbrella borrowed from the funeral home, her daughter Emma pressed close against her left side, her son Lucas rigid against her right. They understood enough to be quiet, but not enough to understand what they had lost. Around them, the family gathered in clusters that formed and dissolved like weather patterns, everyone keeping a precise distance from Sarah and her children, as if failure were something that could spread through proximity. Her mother, Catherine, stood near the grave with perfect posture, accepting condolences from mourners with the practiced grace of someone who had spent 40 years as a corporate attorney. Her brother Brandon leaned against a black town car, checking his phone with the frequency of someone who wanted everyone to know he had more important places to be. His wife Jessica stood beside him, her expression carefully neutral, calculating even in grief. Her younger brother Ryan arrived late, slipping into the back of the small crowd with the furtive movements of someone who owed money he could not repay. No one approached Sarah directly. The space around her remained carefully empty, a radius of discomfort that everyone respected without acknowledgement. She had learned over the years to recognize that particular kind of isolation. It was not hostility exactly, but something quieter and more persistent. Disappointment that had calcified into permanence. Judgment that no longer required words. Her father had been different. Even when she lost her job at Amazon 8 months ago, even when the eviction notices started arriving, even when her marriage to Tyler collapsed under the weight of his gambling debts and her exhaustion, Robert Mitchell had remained steady. He had not offered solutions because there were none that did not require money neither of them possessed. He had offered presence, which turned out to be rarer and more valuable than she had understood while he was alive. The service was brief and generic. Words were spoken by a pastor who had never met her father, who reduced a brilliant man's life to a sequence of dates and roles that meant nothing. Born 1956 in Sacramento, married Catherine Chen, 1982, 3 children, worked in software development, died of heart failure at 68. The eulogy made him sound like a stranger, like someone who had passed through the world without leaving a mark worth remembering. Sarah wanted to stand up and tell them who he really was. Robert Mitchell, who taught himself programming from library books in the 1970s, who worked at 7 different tech startups over 4 decades, each one promising to change the world, each one failing or being acquired for parts, who came home from each failure and immediately started sketching ideas for the next project, who never stopped believing that the next algorithm, the next breakthrough, the next innovation would be the one that mattered, who died in a rented apartment with $38,000 in the bank and a head full of dreams he never stopped chasing. But she said nothing. She had learned that speaking up only invited more judgment, more explanations of how she should feel differently, think differently, be different. So she stood silent in the rain while strangers spoke about her father as if he had been a disappointment, as if a life spent creating and building and trying was somehow less valuable than a life spent climbing corporate ladders and accumulating safe, predictable wealth. After the service, the family gathered at Catherine's house in Bellevue, a place Sarah had not been invited to in 3 years. The living room was exactly as she remembered, decorated with the kind of expensive minimalism that communicated success through absence rather than presence. Everything was white and gray and carefully chosen. Everything had a place. There was no room in Catherine's world for mess or uncertainty or failure. Brandon held court near the fireplace, his voice carrying that particular tone of casual authority that men in tech adopted when they wanted everyone to know they were important. He worked as a VP at Microsoft now, a position he mentioned in every conversation, as if repetition could somehow make the accomplishment more impressive. Jessica stood beside him, nodding at appropriate moments, her venture capitalist instincts analyzing every conversation for potential value. Ryan sat alone on the couch, nursing a beer, his third startup having collapsed 6 months ago. He avoided eye contact with everyone, especially Sarah, as if acknowledging her might somehow confirm his own trajectory toward her kind of failure. Catherine moved through the room with practiced efficiency, accepting condolences, offering thanks, maintaining the performance of a woman in control. She had not spoken directly to Sarah since they arrived, communicating only through brief glances that conveyed disappointment more effectively than words ever could. The reading of the will took place in Catherine's study, a room lined with law books she had collected over 4 decades of corporate practice. Marcus Cole, the estate attorney, was a man in his mid-40s with silver threading his dark hair and the particular wariness of someone who had overseen too many family fractures. He moved through the document with efficient professionalism, his voice flat and unaffected, as if emotion had no place in the distribution of a dead man's assets. The estate was small, $38,000 in a checking account, a 2005 Honda Civic with 160,000 miles, a collection of amateur radio equipment that might sell for a few $100s if someone patient could be found, books on programming and electrical engineering that were already outdated, tools and electronics parts that filled boxes in the storage unit Robert had rented for $90 a month, an expense that had continued even when he could barely afford groceries. Catherine received the car. Brandon received the book collection and the amateur radio equipment. Ryan received the tools and electronics parts, though his expression suggested he would have preferred cash. Each inheritance was acknowledged with brief nods, the family moving through the distribution with the efficiency of people who had already calculated the minimal value of everything being divided. When Sarah's name was called, the room grew quieter. She felt the shift in attention, subtle but unmistakable. Her mother's posture stiffened slightly. Brandon glanced up from his phone. Jessica's expression sharpened with interest. Ryan's eyes flicked toward her with something that might have been sympathy or might have been relief that someone else was about to be disappointed. Marcus Cole continued without pause, his voice carrying the same flat professionalism he had maintained throughout. To my daughter Sarah Mitchell, I leave my personal laptop computer, all files contained therein, and all associated passwords and access credentials, along with my hope that she finishes what I started. The silence that followed was not respectful. It was stunned, then faintly amused. Ryan laughed first, a short bark of sound he tried to suppress but failed. Brandon shook his head slowly, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Jessica's eyebrows raised in an expression of theatrical disbelief. Even Catherine's careful neutrality cracked slightly, her disappointment visible in the tightening around her mouth and eyes. A laptop, that was what her father had left her. Not money to cover the 3 months of back rent she owed, not help with the medical bills that arrived weekly like accusations, not relief from the constant calculations that governed every purchase, every meal, every decision about whether her children's needs could wait one more week. A laptop, a 15-year-old ThinkPad that was probably worth $50 if she could find someone willing to buy obsolete technology. Brandon spoke first, his voice carrying that particular brand of casual cruelty that people mistake for honesty. A laptop, well, at least you can sell it for parts. Might get enough for a nice dinner. His comment drew quiet laughter from Jessica. Even Ryan smiled, though he had the grace to look away when Sarah's eyes found his. She did not respond. She had learned that silence was often the only defense available to those without resources or power. Words could be twisted, used as evidence of instability or irrationality. Silence could not be weaponized as easily. Catherine spoke into the quiet that followed, her voice carrying the measured disappointment of someone who had spent a lifetime being let down by the men in her family. Your father always did have a unique sense of priorities. I am sure he thought he was being meaningful. Her tone made it clear what she thought of meaningful gestures that came without financial value. Marcus Cole retrieved a sealed plastic bag from his briefcase and placed it on the desk. Inside was the laptop, a battered ThinkPad T420 with stickers from dead companies plastered across its lid, logos from startups that had burned through venture capital and vanished. Remnants of 30 years spent chasing innovations that never quite materialized into the success everyone kept promising was just around the corner. There was also a small envelope with Sarah's name written in her father's familiar handwriting, the letter slightly shaky in a way that suggested he had written it near the end. Marcus handed both items to Sarah with an expression that might have been sympathy or might have been the professional detachment of someone who had witnessed too many disappointments to be moved by one more. Your father was very specific in his instructions. The laptop should not be booted up until you are alone. The password is Emma Lucas 1985. He paused, meeting Sarah's eyes with an intensity that seemed to carry meaning beyond the words. He was also very clear that you should not allow anyone else to access the files until you have reviewed them yourself. Sarah nodded, taking the bag and envelope, feeling the weight of the laptop through the plastic. It was heavier than she expected, the solid heft of older technology before everything became thin and light and disposable. The envelope crackled slightly in her grip, suggesting there was more than just a letter inside. Brandon made one more attempt at humor, his voice loud enough to ensure everyone heard. I will give you $500 for it right now, for nostalgia. Dad and I used to work on projects together on that old thing. The offer was clearly meant to be generous, to demonstrate his largesse while simultaneously reminding everyone of his superior financial position. Sarah looked at her brother, this man who made $300,000 a year, and thought $500 was a meaningful gesture, who had stopped returning her calls 6 months ago when she asked to borrow money for Lucas's medical bills, who told their mother that Sarah's problems were the result of poor choices and that helping her would only enable more poor decisions. No, thank you. Her voice was quiet but clear. I think I will keep it. Brandon shrugged, his expression suggesting he had expected nothing different. Your choice. Just remember I offered when you are trying to figure out how to pay rent next month. The cruelty was casual, delivered with the confidence of someone who knew he could hurt her and face no consequences. The gathering dispersed quickly after the reading concluded. There were no invitations to stay for dinner, no suggestions to remain and remember Robert together, no acknowledgement that they were a family bound by anything more than legal obligation and shared DNA. Catherine kissed Emma and Lucas briefly, her touch perfunctory, then moved away without meeting Sarah's eyes. Brandon and Jessica left together, already discussing their evening plans, the funeral and the father they had buried already fading into irrelevance. Ryan lingered for a moment near the door, looking like he wanted to say something, but ultimately left without speaking. Sarah remained in the study after everyone had gone, holding the plastic bag with her father's laptop and the envelope with her name on it. Through the window, she could see the rain had stopped, leaving everything wet and gray and cold. She thought about her father's last months, living alone in that small apartment, working on whatever project had occupied his final days, dying with so little to show for a lifetime of brilliance and effort. Emma appeared in the doorway, her face serious in the way 10-year-olds look when they are trying to understand adult sadness. Mom, can we go? I do not like it here. Everything is too clean. Lucas stood behind his sister, 8 years old and already learning to read the emotional temperature of rooms, to understand when staying meant more discomfort than leaving. Are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong? Sarah felt something crack inside her chest, that particular pain that comes from seeing your children internalize your own sense of not belonging, of not being quite good enough, of taking up space in places where you are barely tolerated. She pulled them both close, feeling Emma's small frame and Lucas's stiff uncertainty, and made a decision. No, baby, we did not do anything wrong. We are going home. Home was a studio apartment in Renton, a 30-minute drive from Bellevue if traffic was light, which it never was. Sarah's car, a 2008 Nissan Sentra with 200,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on for 6 months, made an ominous rattling sound that intensified on hills. She drove carefully, aware that any mechanical failure would be catastrophic, that she had no money for repairs and no credit left for emergencies. Emma and Lucas sat in the back seat, their voices filling the space with questions Sarah answered automatically while her mind circled the weight of the laptop bag on the passenger seat. What had her father meant by finish what I started? What files could be important enough to warrant specific instructions about when and how to access them? What was worth protecting with passwords and warnings about privacy? The apartment building stood on a street where the American dream had frayed at the edges, where working families lived one emergency away from homelessness, where the parking lot was always full of cars held together by hope and duct tape. Sarah parked in her assigned spot, number 247, and gathered the mail from the rusted box that bore their name. 3 envelopes, all bills, all stamped with increasingly urgent language about payment required. The apartment itself was on the 2nd floor, accessible by exterior stairs that needed painting and repair. 500 square feet that cost $1,450 a month, an amount that consumed most of her unemployment check and left her calculating every other expense down to the dollar. Emma and Lucas shared a mattress on the floor in the corner that served as their bedroom. Sarah slept on a couch that folded out into something that was technically a bed, but felt like sleeping on cardboard and springs. The walls were thin enough that she could hear the neighbors arguing, could track their schedules by the sounds of their lives bleeding through inadequate insulation. The kitchen was a narrow galley with appliances from the 1990s that worked intermittently. The bathroom had mold in the corners that she scrubbed weekly but could never quite eliminate. The windows looked out onto the parking lot and the street beyond, offering a view of other people's struggling lives. But it was home. It was theirs. It was the place they came back to every day, where Emma did her homework at the small table and Lucas built elaborate structures from cardboard boxes, where they ate dinner together and Sarah read them stories before bed and they pretended that everything was fine, that this was just a temporary situation, that things would get better soon. Sarah made dinner that night with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had done the same task too many times with too few ingredients. Pasta with jarred sauce, the cheapest brands from the grocery store, supplemented with vegetables from the food bank she visited twice a week. Emma set the table without being asked, her 10-year-old competence a source of pride and heartbreak in equal measure. Lucas folded paper napkins into elaborate shapes, his 8-year-old creativity finding expression in the small spaces available to him. They ate together at the table that was too small for 3 people, but was all they had. Emma talked about school, about the field trip coming up that required $20 Sarah did not have. Lucas mentioned that his teacher said everyone needed an iPad for the new math program, that he was the only one in class who did not have one, that it made him feel stupid and slow. Sarah listened and made notes and calculated impossible mathematics, trying to figure out how to give them what they needed when every dollar was already allocated to keeping them fed and housed. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and dried and put away, after homework was checked and teeth were brushed and both children were settled on their shared mattress, with a story read in her most soothing voice, Sarah finally allowed herself to open the envelope her father had left. Inside was a letter written in his familiar handwriting, shaky but still legible, dated 2 weeks before he died. There was also a small key, the kind that might open a storage unit or a safe deposit box, and a business card for someone named Dr. Helen Zhao at M1T. The letter was brief. Sarah, if you are reading this, I am gone. I am sorry I could not provide more for you and the kids. I know you have struggled, and I know you have felt alone, and I know the family has not been kind. I wish I could change that. I wish I had been more successful, more practical, more like what everyone expected me to be. But I was not built that way. I was built to create, to solve problems, to chase solutions to questions most people did not even know existed. I spent 30 years working on something the world told me was impossible. Everyone said I was wasting my time. Your mother said it, your brother said it, every company that let me go said it. They were wrong. The laptop I left you contains my life's work. It is not just code. It is a solution to a problem that every tech company in the world is trying to solve. It is worth more than you can imagine, more than this family ever gave me credit for. I did not sell it while I was alive because I knew what would happen. The vultures would circle. TechCore, Google, Microsoft, all of them would try to buy it and bury it and control it. Your brother would find a way to claim credit. Your mother would find a way to minimize it. The family would find a way to take it from you. So I hid it. I protected it. And now I am giving it to you. Not because you need money, though God knows you do. Not because you deserve some reward for being the only one who still called me dad instead of Robert or Bob or that guy. I am giving it to you because you are the only one in this family who understands what it means to keep trying after everyone tells you to quit. You lost your job for speaking up about ethics. You lost your marriage because you would not enable Tyler's destruction. You lost the family's respect because you chose your children over their approval. Every choice you made was the hard right thing instead of the easy wrong thing. That is why I trust you with this. The password is Emma Lucas, 1985. Your children's names and the year you were born. The 3 people I loved most, reduced to a string of characters that unlocks everything. Do not boot it up until you are alone. Do not tell anyone what you find. Not yet. Trust Helen Zhao. She helped me years ago, and she will help you now. Finish what I started, Sarah. Not for the money, not for revenge against the family, not even for me. Finish it because the work matters. Because innovation should not be controlled by monopolies. Because the future should be built by people who care about more than profit. I love you. I am proud of you. I always was, even when I did not say it enough. You are going to be fine, better than fine. You are going to win. Dad. Sarah read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking slightly, her mind trying to process words that seemed impossible. Her father had always been working on something, always convinced his next project would be the breakthrough. She had learned to smile and nod and not ask too many questions, to protect herself from the disappointment when another startup failed or another company decided his innovations were not worth the investment required. But this felt different. The specificity of his instructions, the mention of TechCore and Google and Microsoft, the warning about family, the trust placed in someone named Helen Zhao. This was not the rambling optimism of a man chasing impossible dreams. This was the careful preparation of someone who knew exactly what he had and what it was worth. She looked at the laptop still sealed in its plastic bag, covered in stickers from companies that no longer existed. A ThinkPad T420 from 2011, the kind of machine her father preferred because it was built solid, because you could take it apart and repair it, because it did not need to be thin or sexy or new to be functional. The kind of machine that outlasted the companies that made it. Sarah glanced toward the corner where Emma and Lucas slept, their breathing deep and even, their faces peaceful in the dim light from the street. She thought about the eviction notice she had received yesterday, giving her 30 days to pay $4,350 or lose this inadequate apartment that was barely keeping them off the street. She thought about the medical bills and the credit card debt and the constant pressure of never having enough. She thought about her father dying alone in a rented apartment, still working, still believing, still trying to build something that mattered. She opened the plastic bag and removed the laptop. It was heavier than modern machines, the plastic case showing years of wear, small scratches, and dings that told the story of a device that had been used hard and often. The stickers were from companies she vaguely remembered her father mentioning over the years. Neuralsoft, Quantum Edge, DataMind. All of them gone now, absorbed or bankrupted or simply faded into the history of tech companies that bet everything and lost. Sarah opened the laptop carefully, the hinges still solid despite 15 years of use. The screen was dark, waiting. She pressed the power button and heard the familiar whir of an old hard drive spinning up. A sound modern laptops did not make anymore. Everything having moved to silent, solid-state drives that lived and died without mechanical sound. The boot sequence was slow by current standards, but surprisingly smooth. Her father had kept the machine maintained, the operating system clean. A login screen appeared, simple and unadorned, asking for a password. Emma Lucas, 1985. She typed it carefully, each character deliberate, feeling the weight of what she was doing, even if she did not yet understand why it felt significant. The password was accepted. The desktop loaded. The background image hit her like a physical blow. It was a photograph from her college graduation, Stanford 2013. Sarah in her cap and gown, her father standing beside her with the biggest smile she had ever seen on his face. She remembered that day. Her mother had been there but distracted, taking business calls between ceremonies. Her brothers had not come, both claiming work obligations were more important. But her father had been there early, had saved seats, had cheered louder than anyone when her name was called, had told her he was proud so many times it became embarrassing. She had forgotten how happy he looked that day, how uncomplicated his joy was, how much it meant to him to see her succeed at something the family valued, something they could not dismiss as impractical dreaming. Sarah blinked back tears and focused on the screen. The desktop was organized with the same methodical precision her father brought to everything. Folders labeled by year and project name, a documents folder called for Sarah, a larger folder labeled the big one, another folder called patents and legal. She clicked on for Sarah first. Inside was a single video file dated 2 weeks before her father died. The file name was simply Sarah Watch This First. She found her earbuds and plugged them in, not wanting to wake the children, then clicked play. Her father's face filled the screen, He looked tired, older than she remembered. The cancer that would kill him already visible in the hollows of his cheeks and the way his skin seemed too tight across his bones. But his eyes were bright, alert, focused, with the intensity she remembered from when he was excited about a project. Sarah, his voice was rough but clear. If you are watching this, I am gone. I am sorry I could not stay longer. Sorry I will not see Emma and Lucas grow up. Sorry I cannot help you through whatever struggles you are facing right now. I know they are real. I know they are hard. I know the family has not made them easier. But I am leaving you something that will change everything. Not just money, though. There will be money. I am leaving you a solution, a real one, something I have been building for 30 years. He paused, taking a breath that sounded painful. You remember all those failed startups, all those companies that let me go, all those projects your mother and brothers mocked as wastes of time? They were not wastes. They were research. They were iterations. They were stepping stones towards something bigger than any of them understood. I have solved the fundamental problem in artificial intelligence, not partially, not theoretically, actually solved it. The algorithm in this laptop can do what every tech company in the world is spending billions trying to achieve. It can learn from minimal data. It can optimize itself. It can adapt in real time without requiring massive computing resources. Do you understand what that means, Farah? It means every phone, every car, every medical device, every piece of technology that uses AI can be smarter, faster, more efficient. It means the future everyone keeps promising is actually possible. And I built it. Me, the failure, the dreamer, the guy who could never hold a job or make the practical choices or be what everyone expected. Her father's expression changed, became harder. I have a patent, filed in 2019, approved in 2022, patent number 1123456. It is mine, not any company's. Mine. I made sure of that. Learned that lesson the hard way after Neuralsoft tried to claim my work in 2003. TechCore offered me $50 million for it 2 months ago. $50 million, Sarah. Can you imagine? The family thinks I died broke. I died with a standing offer for $50 million. I said no. You wanted to know why? Because they wanted exclusive rights. They wanted to bury it, to control it, to make sure no one else could use it. They wanted to buy my life's work and lock it in a vault so their inferior product could dominate the market without competition. I would rather die broke than let that happen. And I did. But you I trust. You who spoke up at Amazon when your bosses were cutting corners on safety features. You who lost your job because you would not compromise your ethics. You who chose being poor and honest over being comfortable and complicit. Check the big one folder. Read the documentation. Run the tests. You will see I am not exaggerating. This is real. This is valuable. This is the future. And it is yours now. Her father leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping to something almost conspiratorial. Do not tell the family. Not yet. They will try to take it. Brandon will claim he helped develop it. Catherine will find some legal angle to assert partial ownership. Ryan will promise to help, but only want to cut. Jessica will calculate its value and strategize how to maximize their extraction. Trust Helen Zhao. She helped me authenticate the early versions back in the 90s. She knows what this is worth. She will help you protect it and monetize it properly. There is one more thing. TechCore is not going to give up easily. When they find out I died and you inherited this, they will come after you. They will offer you money. They will threaten you. They will try every angle to get control of this patent before you understand what you have. Do not sell to them. Not for 50 million, not for 100 million. This is worth more, much more, and more importantly, this should not be owned by a monopoly. License it. Build a company around it. Go public if you want, but do not give them exclusive control. The future should not belong to whoever has the biggest bank account. His expression softened again. I know this is a lot. I know you are struggling. I know you have Emma and Lucas to think about and bills to pay and immediate pressures that make long-term thinking feel like a luxury. But you are stronger than I ever was. You can do what I could not. You can build something meaningful and keep your soul. You do not have to choose between principles and security. You can have both. I love you, Sarah. I am proud of you. Finish what I started, not for revenge, not for validation, not even for me. Finish it because it is right. Because innovation should serve people, not control them. Because you can. The video ended. Her father's face froze on the screen for a moment before the player closed, leaving Sarah staring at her desktop background, at that photograph of her graduation day, at her father's smile. She sat in the dark apartment, her children sleeping 10 feet away, her mind reeling through everything she had just heard. $50 million, a patent worth potentially billions, 30 years of work, a solution to problems she barely understood but knew were real because she had worked in tech long enough to recognize the fundamental challenges everyone was chasing. She clicked on the big one folder with hands that trembled slightly. Inside were files and subfolders organized with obsessive precision. Source code in multiple languages. Documentation running to thousands of pages. Test results. Performance benchmarks. Academic papers. And a subfolder labeled Patent Materials. Sarah opened the patent materials and found a PDF of the actual patent document. Patent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, filed March 2019, approved November 2022. Inventor, Robert James Mitchell. Title, Adaptive Neural Network Optimization through Minimal Dataset Learning. The language was dense, technical, but even skimming it, Sarah could see the implications. This was not incremental improvement. This was fundamental breakthrough. She opened another folder labeled Communications and found email threads that made her breath catch. Messages from Tom Richards, CEO of TechCore, one of the 5 largest tech companies in America. The most recent was dated 6 weeks before her father died. Bob, this is our final offer. $50 million all cash, immediate payment. Exclusive worldwide rights to patent 11234567. This is more than fair for an unproven technology. Accept or we move on without you. Her father's response, drafted but never sent, was in the drafts folder. Tom, my technology is proven. Your offer is insult disguised as generosity. You are offering $50 million because you know the real value is 10 times that. You want exclusive rights because you know if this goes to multiple licensees, your inferior product cannot compete. The answer is no. It has always been no. It will always be no. Sarah sat back, her mind racing through calculations and implications and possibilities that seemed too large to fit inside her small apartment, inside her small life, inside the small understanding she had of what her father had actually accomplished. Her phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. Mom wants to know if you are okay. She feels bad about how things went today. Call her maybe? Sarah looked at the text, at her brother's casual assumption that she would respond to their mother's guilt with gratitude, that she would make Catherine feel better about treating her like a burden. She thought about her father's warning. They will try to take it. She deleted the text without responding. Then she opened her laptop again and began to read through the documentation her father had left behind. Technical specifications she had to work to understand. Performance metrics that seemed impossible until she cross-referenced them with current industry standards. Evidence accumulating with every page that Robert Mitchell, the family failure, the impractical dreamer, the man who died with $38,000 in the bank, had actually done what everyone said was impossible. He had built the future, and he had given it to her. Outside, the rain started again, pattering against the windows of the studio apartment, where Sarah Mitchell sat, surrounded by bills she could not pay, and children she could barely feed, and the overwhelming weight of a gift she did not yet know how to carry. But somewhere in the darkness between not knowing and understanding, between the life she had been living and the life that was about to begin, she felt something shift. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Finish what I started. She would, not because she knew how, not because she felt ready, not because the path forward was clear. She would finish it because he had trusted her, because he had seen something in her the rest of the family missed, because failure was only permanent if you stopped trying. And Sarah Mitchell, like her father before her, had never learned how to quit. The laptop screen glowed in the darkness. The rain fell on the roof. Her children slept peacefully 10 feet away. And in folders and files and lines of code, the future waited to be claimed by someone brave enough, or desperate enough, or stubborn enough to believe it was possible. Tomorrow she would start making calls. Tomorrow she would begin understanding what she had inherited. Tomorrow the hard work would begin. But tonight, for just this moment, Sarah allowed herself to hope, to believe that maybe, just maybe, the laptop everyone laughed about was exactly what her father promised it would be. The answer to everything. Sarah did not sleep that night. She sat at the small kitchen table while rain drummed against the windows, reading through documentation her father had spent 3 decades creating. The technical specifications were dense, written in the particular language of computer science that communicated precision through abstraction. But she had worked in software long enough to understand what she was seeing. This was not the optimistic exaggeration of a dreamer. This was the careful documentation of someone who had actually solved a problem the entire tech industry was racing to crack. The algorithm her father had developed allowed artificial intelligence systems to learn from datasets one-tenth the size of what current technology required. Where Google and Microsoft and Amazon were throwing billions of dollars at massive server farms processing millions of training examples, her father had found an elegant mathematical approach that achieved better results with a fraction of the resources. It was the difference between brute force and genuine innovation, between buying your way to a solution and thinking your way there. By 3 in the morning, Sarah had filled a notebook with questions and calculations. By 4, she had cross-referenced her father's performance benchmarks with published research papers and found that his results were not just competitive, but superior. By 5, she had started making a list of people who might be able to help her understand what to do next. A list that currently contained exactly one name: Dr. Helen Zhao. The business card her father had left was simple white stock with black text. Helen Zhao, Professor of Computer Science, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A phone number, an email address. No other context, no explanation of who she was or why Robert Mitchell had trusted her when he trusted almost no one. Sarah waited until 7 in the morning East Coast time before calling, sitting on the fire escape outside her apartment with her phone and a cup of instant coffee, watching the Seattle suburbs wake up around her. The phone rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered, slightly breathless as if she had been hurrying to reach it. "This is Helen Zhao." The accent was faint, American education layered over something that might have been Mandarin in childhood. The voice carried the particular authority of someone who spent her life being the smartest person in most rooms. "Dr. Zhao, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I am Robert Mitchell's daughter." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Sarah thought the connection might have dropped. Then Helen Zhao's voice returned, changed in a way that suggested emotions suppressed through effort. "Bob is gone. It was not a question. 2 days ago. Heart failure. I am sorry, I did not know if you had heard." Another pause, shorter this time. "I knew something was wrong. He stopped responding to emails 3 weeks ago." Bob always responded to emails. Always. Her voice caught slightly on the last word. Sarah felt tears threaten and pushed them back. She had already cried too much for a man who would have told her to save her energy for solving problems instead of mourning ones already finished. "He left me a laptop and a letter and your card. He said to trust you." "What did he leave on the laptop?" The question came quickly, sharp with professional interest cutting through personal grief. "Everything. The algorithm, the patent, documentation. He said it was worth more than $50 million. He said TechCore wanted to buy it and bury it." Helen Zhao laughed, a sound without humor. $50 million. Tom Richards insulted Bob with that offer. "Your father's work is worth 10 times that at minimum, possibly more if commercialized properly." Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. "You know about the TechCore offer? Bob sent me the emails, asked my opinion. I told him to tell Richards to go to hell." Helen paused. "I assume that is what he did?" "He died broke rather than sell it to them." "Good." Helen's approval was absolute. "Your father was many things, Sarah, but he understood that some principles cannot be compromised. TechCore wanted exclusive rights not because they needed his technology, but because they needed to prevent anyone else from having it. Their AI division has burned through $200 million in the last 3 years, and they are still years behind the competition. Bob's algorithm would have made their investment worthless overnight. I do not know what to do with it." Sarah heard the exhaustion in her own voice. "I have 2 children and an eviction notice and 8 months of unemployment. My family thinks the laptop is worth $50 for parts. I'm not sure I can afford to fight a company with an $80 billion market cap, even if my father's work is as valuable as he believed. Come to Boston." Helen's command was immediate and certain. "Bring the laptop, bring everything. I will clear my schedule for tomorrow. We will figure this out together. I cannot afford a plane ticket to Boston right now. Then I will buy you one. Give me your email address. You will have a confirmation in 10 minutes. Bring your children if you need to." I have space. But Sarah, listen to me carefully. Do not tell anyone else what you found. Not friends, not family, not anyone. The moment word gets out that Bob's daughter has his life's work, the pressure will begin. Companies will make offers. Lawyers will appear. Your family will want their share. You need to understand what you have before you face any of that. My brother already asked to buy the laptop for $500. Helen laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. I assume you told him no. I told him no. Good instincts. Keep them. I will see you tomorrow. The call ended. Sarah sat on the fire escape, watching traffic build on the street below, holding a phone that connected her to a future she could barely comprehend. Inside the apartment, she could hear Emma and Lucas beginning to wake, their voices soft and sleep blurred as they navigated the morning routine they had learned to manage with minimal adult supervision. The email from Helen Zhao arrived 8 minutes later. 3 round-trip tickets, Seattle to Boston, departing that afternoon, returning in 3 days. Sarah stared at the confirmation number, at the seat assignments, at the casual expenditure of money that would have taken her months to save. Whoever Helen Zhao was, she had resources and she was willing to spend them. Sarah went inside and found Emma and Lucas sitting at the small table eating cereal from bowls they had gotten themselves. Their independence born from necessity, making them older than their years should require. We are going on a trip, today, to Boston. Emma's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Why? Because someone who knew Grandpa Bob wants to help us with something he left behind. The laptop? Lucas asked. He had the straightforward practicality of 8-year-olds who have learned that adult complications usually mean disruption to routine. Yes, the laptop. Are we coming back? Emma's question carried weight beyond the words. The fear of another sudden change, another loss of stability. In 3 days, I promise. This is just a trip, not a move. They accepted this with the resignation of children who had learned that arguing with adult decisions accomplished nothing. Sarah helped them pack small bags with clothes for 3 days, then packed her own things and the laptop into her single worn backpack. The apartment looked even smaller from the perspective of leaving, the accumulation of their compressed life somehow both too much and not nearly enough. The Uber to the airport cost $47. Sarah did not have but charged to a credit card that was already maxed out, gambling that whatever happened in Boston would somehow justify the expense. The airport was crowded with people traveling for business and pleasure, everyone moving with the casual confidence of those who belonged in airports, who flew regularly enough that security lines and gate changes were familiar inconveniences rather than exotic stresses. Emma and Lucas pressed their faces to the airplane window during takeoff, watching Seattle fall away beneath them, the city where they had been born transformed into a landscape of geometry and distance. Sarah sat between them, the laptop bag on her lap, her father's life work compressed into 15 pounds of obsolete hardware that everyone except Helen Zhao believed was worthless. The flight took 5 hours. Sarah watched her children sleep, watched strangers read and work and watch movies, watched the country pass beneath them in patterns of cities and farmland and mountains. Somewhere down there, people were living normal lives, worrying about normal problems, unaware that above them flew a woman carrying technology that might reshape their futures in ways they would never know to thank her father for. Helen Zhao met them at Logan Airport, a woman in her mid-50s with silver streaking her black hair and eyes that assessed Sarah and her children with the quick evaluation of someone who made judgments rapidly and accurately. She was smaller than Sarah expected, maybe 5 feet tall, dressed in jeans and a MIT sweatshirt that had seen better decades, moving through the crowd with the efficient purpose of someone who did not waste time or motion. Sarah. Helen extended her hand, her grip firm and brief. These must be Emma and Lucas. Emma shook hands with a solemn formality. Lucas waved, suddenly shy. Helen smiled at them both with warmth that transformed her serious expression into something grandmother might show, though Sarah suspected Helen Zhao had never had children of her own. You must be exhausted. We will get you settled first. Then we can talk about why you are really here. Helen's car was a 10-year-old Subaru wagon with MIT parking stickers and bumper stickers about science and reason covering the back. She drove with the aggressive competence of someone who had learned to navigate Boston traffic through decades of survival rather than courtesy. She took them to a house in Cambridge, a 3-story Victorian that had been converted into apartments, the kind of place where MIT professors lived among graduate students and young professionals, where intellectual capital mattered more than financial capital. Her apartment was on the second floor, filled with books and papers and computers in various states of assembly and disassembly, the organized chaos of someone whose work bled into every aspect of their environment. She showed Emma and Lucas to a guest room with two twin beds and told them they could watch television or play games on the tablet she handed them with casual generosity. Then she led Sarah to a study lined with whiteboards covered in equations and diagrams, sat her down in a comfortable chair, and said the words Sarah had been both hoping for and dreading. "Show me what Bob left you." Sarah opened the laptop and booted it up. The familiar whir of the hard drive, somehow comforting in this strange place surrounded by technology decades newer. She logged in and turned the screen toward Helen, who leaned forward with the focused intensity of someone examining something precious or dangerous or both. Helen navigated through folders with practiced efficiency, opening files and scanning their contents, with speed that suggested she was not reading so much as confirming things she already suspected. Her expression remained neutral, but Sarah watched her eyes widen slightly when she opened the patent documentation, watched her fingers pause on the keyboard when she found the performance benchmarks, watched her lean back in her chair when she finished reviewing the core algorithm code. "My God," Helen's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "He actually finished it. I helped him with the early versions back in 1998. He was working on the problem even then. We all told him it was impossible. The mathematics did not work. The computing power required would be prohibitive. He kept saying he just needed to find the right approach, the elegant solution that bypassed brute force. And he found it?" Helen turned the laptop back to Sarah. "Your father found something better than a solution. He found the solution. This algorithm is not incrementally better than what the big tech companies are using. It is fundamentally superior. Different approach, different mathematics. Results that should not be possible but somehow are." She stood and walked to one of the whiteboards, erasing a section of equations and beginning to write new ones. Her handwriting, quick and certain. Current AI learning models require massive data sets because they are essentially running statistical analyses across millions of examples, finding patterns through repetition. Your father's approach uses something closer to how human children learn. We do not need to see a million dogs to understand what a dog is. We see a few dozen and our brains extrapolate the pattern. Bob figured out how to make algorithms do something similar. Sarah watched Helen fill the whiteboard with mathematical expressions that might as well have been ancient languages for all she understood them. Is it really worth hundreds of millions of dollars? Helen set down the marker and turned to face Sarah with an expression of absolute seriousness. If you license this technology to multiple companies, if you retain ownership and charge reasonable fees for commercial use, if you allow it to be deployed across the entire tech industry instead of letting one monopoly control it, this patent could generate revenue streams worth $500 million over the next 10 years. Possibly more. The number was too large to process, too abstract to feel real. Sarah had spent the last 8 months calculating her life in terms of hundreds of dollars, measuring survival in weeks between unemployment checks. $500 million existed in a different reality, a different language, a different mathematics than anything that had governed her existence. What do I do? Helen sat back down, her professorial authority shifting into something more personal, more careful. You have 3 realistic options. First, you sell the patent outright to one company. TechCore will offer you maybe 100 to 150 million. Google or Apple might go as high as 200 million. You take the money, pay the taxes, walk away with perhaps 120 million after everything is settled. Your children are set for life. You never work again if you do not want to. That is the safe choice. And the second option? You license the patent non-exclusively to multiple companies. Charge them annual fees plus royalties on revenue generated using the technology. This generates less immediate cash but more total money over time. Maybe 20 to 30 million per year for the next decade. Total revenue 300 to 400 million. You retain ownership, maintain control, ensure the technology serves the public good instead of private monopoly. Helen paused, studying Sarah's face. The third option is the hardest and potentially most valuable. You build a company around the patent, develop products that use your father's algorithm, raise venture capital, hire engineers, go public eventually. If successful, your equity stake could be worth $1 billion or more. But this path requires years of work, constant pressure, and the willingness to bet everything that you can execute on a vision your father had but could not manifest himself. Which option would my father have wanted? Helen smiled sadly. Bob would have wanted option 3. He wanted to change the world, not just profit from innovation. But Bob also did not have children depending on him. Bob could afford to die broke because he only disappointed himself and your mother. You have Emma and Lucas to consider. Sarah thought about her children in the next room, about the years they had spent in inadequate apartments, wearing secondhand clothes, pretending not to notice when dinner was smaller than it should be. She thought about Emma needing glasses she could not afford, and Lucas wanting an iPad like the other children had, and both of them learning to expect less, to ask for less, to be less than they deserved. How long would option 2 take? The licensing approach? Helen considered 6 months to a year to set up properly. You would need a patent attorney, a licensing agent, contracts with each company, legal structures to manage the revenue. During that time, you would have no income from this, just expenses. But once established, the revenue becomes relatively passive. You hire people to manage the relationships, you collect checks, you live your life. Can I afford to wait 6 months? That depends. Do you have resources to sustain yourself during the setup period? Sarah laughed without humor. I have an eviction notice, max credit cards, and maybe $200 in my checking account. I need income now, not in 6 months. Helen nodded as if she had expected this answer. Then we modify option 2. You negotiate in advance from the first licensing deal. Someone pays you 10 or 20 million upfront against future royalties. You use that to stabilize your life, pay your debts, create security for your children. Then you spend the next year building the proper structure while living on that advance. Who would give me $20 million up front? Any company that understands what they are getting. Helen pulled out her phone and began scrolling through contacts. I know people at Google, at Apple, at Samsung. I can make introductions. But Sarah, before we do that, you need to understand something critical. The moment we start approaching companies, word will get out. The tech industry is small. People talk. Your brother works at Microsoft. Your mother has connections in corporate law. Your family will hear that Bob's laptop is worth real money. They will want their share. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. My mother already filed some kind of estate claim. She thinks she deserves half of everything because she was married to him when he developed the early versions. That is a problem. Helen's expression turned serious. If there is active litigation over the estate, no company will offer you money until it is resolved. The legal uncertainty makes the asset too risky. They will wait to see who wins in court, then negotiate with the winner. So what do? You settle with your family quickly. Give them something. Not 50%, that is absurd, but enough to make the lawsuit go away. Maybe 15 or 20%. You keep controlling interest. They get enough to feel like they won. Everyone moves forward. Sarah thought about her mother's cold disappointment, her brother Brandon's casual cruelty, the family dinner where they had all laughed about the worthless laptop. The idea of giving them millions of dollars for contributing nothing but contempt made something bitter rise in her throat. They do not deserve anything. They laughed at me. They called my father a failure. They have spent years making me feel like a burden for struggling with problems they never had to face. Helen's expression softened with understanding. You are right. They do not deserve anything. But this is not about fairness. This is about removing obstacles between you and the future you want to build. Sometimes the smart play is giving people who wronged you exactly what they want, then using your victory to prove how little they actually understood. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. The screen showed her mother's name. Sarah stared at it for 3 rings before Helen gestured to answer it. Better to know what they want than to let them operate in darkness. Sarah answered, her voice carefully neutral. Mom, Catherine Mitchell's voice came through cold and sharp. Where are you? I called your apartment and there was no answer. I called your neighbor and she said she saw you leaving with suitcases. I am taking care of something. The kids and I will be back in a few days. Taking care of what? With what money? Sarah, if you are doing something reckless, if you are making decisions without thinking about the consequences, we need to talk about getting you help. The implication landed like a slap. Her mother was suggesting she was mentally unstable, creating a narrative that could be used in court to challenge her competence, to argue that the laptop should be transferred to someone responsible like Brandon or Catherine herself. I am fine, Mom. I am visiting a friend of Dad's, someone who worked with him years ago. What friend? The suspicion in Catherine's voice was sharp enough to cut. A professor at MIT. Dad asked me to contact her after he died. The pause that followed felt weighted with calculation. MIT, what did your father leave with someone at MIT? Nothing. She is just helping me understand some of his old work. What work, Sarah? Your father worked at a dozen companies on 100 projects. What specifically are you asking this professor about? Sarah met Helen's eyes. The older woman nodded slightly, a gesture that seemed to say, trust yourself, do not give more than necessary. His patent, the algorithm he was working on at the end. Catherine's voice sharpened. The patent is part of the estate. It is currently under legal review to determine proper ownership, given that initial development occurred during our marriage. You do not have the right to make decisions about it unilaterally. Dad left it to me specifically. The will was clear. Wills can be challenged. Estates can be contested. Assets can be redistributed based on equitable claims that supersede testamentary intentions. I am a corporate attorney, Sarah. I know how these things work. Helen made a gesture, a slight motion with her hand that Sarah interpreted as end this conversation now. Mom, I have to go. We can talk when I get back to Seattle. Sarah, if you do anything with that patent without consulting the family, there will be legal consequences. I am trying to help you avoid making mistakes that will hurt everyone. The call ended. Sarah set the phone down with a hand that trembled slightly, anger and fear mixing into something that tasted metallic and bitter. She knows. Helen's assessment was immediate. Someone told her the laptop might be valuable. Maybe the lawyer who handled the estate. Maybe your brother did some research and found the patent filing. Either way, they know enough to be suspicious. What do I do? We accelerate the timeline. Helen was already typing on her laptop, sending emails with rapid efficiency. I am going to contact 3 companies tonight: Google, Apple, and Samsung. I will tell them Bob's daughter has the patent and is taking offers. I will suggest they respond within 48 hours if they are interested. We create a bidding environment, drive up the price, get you an offer with a substantial advance, and force your family's hand. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the speed at which her life was shifting, the stakes escalating beyond anything she knew how to navigate. What if they offer different amounts? What if I choose wrong? Then you choose wrong and you are still rich. Helen's bluntness cut through the anxiety. Sarah, you are trying to optimize for perfect when good enough will change your life completely. 100 million or 200 million, the difference is academic when you currently have $200 in the bank. That night, Sarah lay in the guest bed in Helen Zhao's Cambridge apartment, listening to Emma and Lucas breathe in the twin bed across the room, her mind racing through futures that all seemed equally impossible and equally terrifying. She thought about her father, who had spent 30 years chasing a dream everyone told him was foolish, who had died broke and alone, believing he had created something that mattered. He had been right. That was the part that kept circling through her thoughts. Robert Mitchell, the family failure, the impractical dreamer, the man who could never hold a job or make the sensible choices or be what everyone expected, had been right all along. He had solved the impossible problem. He had created genuine innovation. He had built a future. And he had given it to Sarah not because she was the most qualified or the most connected or the most likely to succeed, but because she was the only one who understood what it meant to keep trying after everyone told you to quit. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. Mom says you are in Boston doing something with Dad's patent. Whatever you are planning, stop. The family needs to be involved in any decisions. You do not have the experience to handle this alone. Sarah read the message 3 times, feeling the familiar weight of her family's low expectations, their absolute certainty that she would fail without their guidance, their inability to imagine that she might be capable of succeeding in ways they had never predicted. She deleted the message without responding. Another text arrived, this time from Ryan. I heard you are talking to people about Dad's work. If there is money involved, I need you to know I have debts, serious debts. I need help. Please do not forget about family. Sarah stared at this message longer. Ryan at least was honest about his motives. He needed money and saw her potential success as a solution to his own failures. There was something almost refreshing about his transparent selfishness compared to Brandon's attempts to frame his control as concern, or Catherine's legalistic maneuvering disguised as protecting family interests. She deleted this message too. A third text from a number she did not recognize. This is Tom Richards, CEO of TechCore. I understand you have inherited Bob Mitchell's patent. I would like to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Sarah felt ice run through her veins. Helen had not even sent her emails yet. How did Tom Richards know she was in Boston? How did he have her number? Who was feeding him information? She showed the text to Helen the next morning. The professor read it once, then looked at Sarah with an expression that combined anger and grim satisfaction. Your family's talking to TechCore. Probably Brandon. He works at Microsoft, but everyone in the industry knows everyone else. He told Richards that Bob's daughter has the patent and might not understand its value. Richards is trying to get to you before anyone else does, before you understand what you are sitting on. What do I do? Nothing. Do not respond. Let him wonder. Let him worry. Companies like TechCore are used to controlling negotiations through information asymmetry. They win when they know more than you do. Right now, Richards is operating on incomplete intelligence. He knows you have the patent, but he does not know what you plan to do with it. That uncertainty is valuable. Helen's emails to Google, Apple, and Samsung went out that morning. By noon East Coast time, all three companies had responded requesting meetings. By 2 in the afternoon, Helen had scheduled video calls for that evening with representatives from each company's AI divisions. Sarah spent the afternoon learning from Helen how to talk about the technology without claiming expertise she did not have, how to listen for what companies were really asking versus what they were saying, how to recognize when offers were insults disguised as generosity. It was a crash course in negotiation taught by someone who had spent decades watching brilliant engineers get cheated out of the value of their innovations by smooth-talking business people who knew how to exploit technical genius with contract language. The first call was with Google. 3 people appeared on the screen, 2 men and 1 woman, all with titles like Director of AI Strategy and VP of Research Partnerships. They were professionally friendly, asking about her father with what seemed like genuine respect, discussing the patent with careful language that revealed they had done their homework. We would be interested in licensing the algorithm for integration into our cloud services platform. The woman speaking had the kind of voice that made everything sound reasonable and measured. We typically structure these arrangements as a combination of upfront payment and revenue sharing based on usage metrics. What kind of upfront payment? Sarah kept her voice steady, channeling Helen's coaching about not showing desperation or ignorance. For something of this potential value, we could offer $25 million against future royalties. Sarah felt her heart rate spike, but forced herself to nod, as if $25 million was an amount she evaluated regularly. What would the revenue sharing look like? We would pay 0.5% of revenue generated by services utilizing the Mitchell algorithm. The man who spoke had clearly calculated that this was a reasonable offer. Helen, sitting just outside the camera frame, shook her head firmly and held up a piece of paper with writing on it. Sarah read it quickly. 5% of revenue minimum, $50 million advance. Sarah took a breath. I appreciate the offer, but I would need to see 5% of revenue and an advance of at least $50 million for a non-exclusive license. The 3 Google representatives exchanged glances. That is significantly above our initial budget allocation for this type of partnership. Then perhaps your budget does not reflect the value of what I am offering. Sarah was amazed at how calm her own voice sounded. The call ended with promises to discuss internally and reconnect within 24 hours. The Apple call was similar, slightly higher initial offer, but the same dance of lowballing followed by expressed surprise when Sarah pushed back. The Samsung call was more direct, an executive named Park offering $40 million upfront and 3% of revenue with barely any preamble. Helen made notes throughout all 3 calls, then pulled up a whiteboard after they finished. Google will come back with $40 million and 2%. Apple will match that. Samsung is already at their ceiling. She wrote numbers as she talked. You push Google and Apple to $50 million and 4%. They will negotiate to $45 million and 3%. You take the best of those 2 offers. That is still less than what my father was offered by TechCore. Helen nodded, yes, but these are non-exclusive licenses. You can license to all 3 companies. 3 deals at $45 million each is $135 million total in advances, plus 3% of their AI revenue going forward. TechCore was offering $50 million for exclusive rights, meaning no one else could use the technology. Your way is better for you and better for innovation. Sarah tried to do the math on what 3% of Google's AI revenue might mean, and failed completely. The numbers were too large, too abstract, existed in realms of wealth she had no framework for understanding. Over the next 48 hours, the negotiations unfolded exactly as Helen predicted. Google and Apple both came back with revised offers. Sarah pushed back with language Helen fed her. They negotiated. The numbers climbed. By the end of the second day, she had 3 separate term sheets, non-binding but serious, from Google, Apple, and Samsung. Google's final offer was $48 million upfront, 3.5% of revenue from AI services using the Mitchell algorithm, non-exclusive worldwide license. Apple matched at $48 million and 3.5%. Samsung stayed at $40 million and 3%. Sarah accepted Google and Apple's offers pending legal review, declining Samsung with thanks and the suggestion they might revisit in the future. The combined advance payment was $96 million. After taxes, attorney fees, and setup costs, Helen estimated Sarah would clear approximately $55 million within 90 days. $55 million. The number still did not feel real. That night, Sarah called her mother. Catherine answered on the first ring, her voice tight with barely suppressed anger. "I hope you are proud of yourself, sneaking around behind the family's back, making deals without consulting anyone. Your father would be ashamed." Sarah felt something inside her harden into a resolve she had not known she possessed. "Dad left the patent to me. The will was clear. I have offers from Google and Apple for non-exclusive licenses. I am prepared to settle the estate dispute by giving you and the boys 15% of the total revenue." 15%, Catherine's voice was ice. "I was married to your father for 30 years. I supported him through every failed startup. I raised you children while he chased impossible dreams. And you think 15% is fair? Take it or take nothing." Sarah's voice remained steady. "I have attorneys who assure me the will is ironclad. You can drag this through court for 2 years and spend hundreds of thousands in legal fees and probably lose. Or you can accept 15% of what will be over $100 million in the next decade and walk away now." The silence stretched long enough that Sarah wondered if her mother had hung up. Then Catherine spoke, her voice different, smaller, something that might have been grief bleeding through the anger. "He really did it. After all these years, all the failures, all the promises that never materialized, he actually built something that mattered. Yes, he really did. And he trusted you with it. Not me, not Brandon, you. Because I was the only one who did not laugh when everyone else thought he was foolish." Another pause. "I will take the 15%. But Sarah, I want you to know something. I was wrong about you, about your father, about what matters. I spent 40 years thinking success was stability and status and predictable income. Your father understood it was something else entirely." The call ended. Sarah sat in Helen Zhao's study, holding a phone that connected her to a life that was already changing in ways she could barely track. Her children slept peacefully in the next room. Somewhere in Seattle, her mother was probably crying for the first time since the funeral. Somewhere in Redmond, Brandon was learning that his little sister had just negotiated deals with Google and Apple without his help or approval. Somewhere in the corporate offices of TechCore, Tom Richards was realizing that Bob Mitchell's patent was not going to be buried quietly in exclusive licensing after all. And somewhere in the digital files of an obsolete laptop, Robert Mitchell's life work waited to be deployed across the world to make artificial intelligence more accessible, more efficient, more democratic than the monopolies had ever intended. Sarah opened her email and found a message from Marcus Cole, the patent attorney Helen had recommended. The contracts would be ready for review in 1 week. The first advance payment would hit her account within 30 days of signing. Her life was about to change in ways both wonderful and terrifying. She thought about her father's video message, his voice rough with cancer but clear with conviction. "Finish what I started." She was finishing it, not the way he might have imagined, not the way the family expected, but in the way that honored his actual values rather than their assumptions about what he wanted. Tomorrow she would fly back to Seattle. Tomorrow she would start building the structure to manage wealth she could barely comprehend. Tomorrow the hard work of transforming her life would begin in earnest. But tonight, for just this moment, Sarah Mitchell allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in years. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, the future did not have to be a continuation of the past. That maybe struggle and poverty and disappointment were not permanent conditions, but temporary circumstances. That maybe her father had been right all along about the value of persistence, about the importance of finishing what you started, about trusting that the work mattered even when no one else believed it. She fell asleep that night in a borrowed bed 3,000 miles from home, her children sleeping beside her future secured by an algorithm her father spent 30 years perfecting, and the trust he placed in a daughter everyone else had given up on. And in the morning, everything would begin to change. The first 3 months after signing the licensing agreements with Google and Apple passed in a blur of legal paperwork and financial structures and sleepless nights, where Sarah woke up convinced the entire thing had been a fever dream. But the wire transfer that hit her account 93 days after signing was real enough. $48 million from Google, $48 million from Apple. After taxes and legal fees and setting aside funds for the family settlement, Sarah had $54 million in liquid assets and the promise of revenue sharing that could generate another 30 to 50 million per year for the next decade. She paid off every debt she had accumulated over 8 months of unemployment, medical bills that had followed her like shadows, credit cards maxed out buying groceries and keeping the lights on, 3 months of back rent plus penalties. The money disappeared so quickly it barely registered as spending, more like erasing evidence of a life she was leaving behind. Then she bought the house in a good school district, modest by tech money standards, but palatial compared to the studio apartment where Emma and Lucas had shared a mattress on the floor. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a kitchen with appliances that all worked simultaneously. The kids ran through empty rooms shouting about which would be theirs, their voices echoing off walls that would soon be filled with the sounds of a family that no longer had to whisper about money. But the money also brought pressure Sarah had not anticipated. Catherine accepted the 15% settlement with surprising grace, perhaps recognizing that fighting would cost more in legal fees than she would ever recover. Brandon signed the agreement with barely concealed resentment, his signature angry slashes across pages that formalized his younger sister's triumph over his dismissal. Ryan cashed his check within hours and used it to pay debts Sarah suspected were uglier than he admitted. The family dynamics shifted in ways both subtle and obvious. Catherine called weekly now, ostensibly to check on Emma and Lucas, but really to remind Sarah that family obligations existed even when family members had proven themselves unworthy of trust. Brandon stopped returning calls entirely, his silence communicating hurt pride more effectively than words ever could. Ryan asked for loans to start another business, seemed genuinely surprised when Sarah said no, disappeared for months when she suggested he get a job instead of chasing the next startup idea. But the real pressure came from an unexpected source. David Brennan called 6 weeks after the licensing deals closed, his voice carrying the particular excitement of someone who had spotted an opportunity too good to ignore. Sarah, I have been thinking. You have the Mitchell algorithm licensed to 2 companies. You have revenue coming in. You have vindicated your father's work. That is all good. But it is not enough. What do you mean, not enough? Sarah was in her new home office, a room with actual walls and a door that closed, watching Emma and Lucas play in the backyard through a window that framed a view of normalcy she had spent years believing was permanently out of reach. You are collecting tolls. That is fine for financial security, but it is not transformative. Your father did not spend 30 years building this algorithm so Google and Apple could integrate it into their existing products and pay you royalties. He built it to change how AI gets deployed, to democratize access, to prove that innovation serves people best when it is not controlled by monopolies. David paused, letting that sink in. You should build a company, not just license the algorithm, but create products that demonstrate what it can actually do. Show the world that AI does not require massive server farms in billion-dollar budgets. Prove that your father's approach is not just theoretically superior, but practically better. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. I am not a CEO. I am a software engineer who got fired for having opinions. I have 2 kids and $50 million and a family that barely speaks to me. I do not know how to build a company. Neither did your father when he started. Neither did I when I built my first business. Neither does anyone before they do it. David's voice carried absolute certainty. But you know what your father's algorithm can do. You understand the technical details better than any CEO I could hire. And you care about the mission in ways that matter more than business school credentials. What if I fail? Then you fail with $50 million in the bank and licensing revenue still coming in. David laughed. Sarah, you are operating from a position of strength for the first time in your life. Use it. Build something. Do not just survive on your father's legacy. Extend it. The conversation ended, but the idea refused to leave. Sarah spent days researching what building a company would actually require. Capital, which she had, technical talent, which she could recruit, market opportunity, which existed in the gap between expensive enterprise AI and the billions of users who needed smarter technology but could not afford premium solutions. Strategic vision, which terrified her but seemed less impossible than it had before David's call. She discussed it with Helen Zhao over a video call, the MIT professor's opinion carrying weight that trumped Sarah's self-doubt. Building a company is hard. Helen did not soften the truth. It will consume your life for years. You will make mistakes that cost millions of dollars. You will hire wrong people and trust wrong partners and wake up at 3 in the morning convinced you are destroying everything your father built. But you will also create something real, something that puts his algorithm into the hands of people who need it most. Something that proves innovation can serve humanity instead of just extracting profit. What would I even build? Products? Services? Sarah felt overwhelmed by possibilities. Start small. Helen pulled up a whiteboard visible through her camera. Your father's algorithm excels at edge computing, AI that runs on devices instead of requiring cloud connectivity. Build a smartphone app that learns user patterns and optimizes performance without sending data to servers. Prove that privacy and intelligence are not mutually exclusive. Launch it free with a paid enterprise tier. Show that the Mitchell algorithm is not just theoretical brilliance, but practical utility. Over the next month, Sarah assembled what Helen called a minimum viable team. 3 engineers recruited from Amazon and Microsoft, people who had worked with her before she was fired and respected her technical judgment more than they feared career risk. A product manager from Google who had grown tired of building features that maximize ad revenue instead of user value. A designer from Apple who wanted to work on something that mattered. They met in coffee shops and co-working spaces, sketching ideas on napkins and whiteboards, arguing about features and priorities in what actually constituted a minimum viable product. Sarah funded everything from her own capital, refusing to take investor money until she had something worth investing in. The team worked nights and weekends, building prototypes, testing assumptions, discovering that turning brilliant algorithm into usable software required solving hundreds of problems her father had never needed to address. The product began to take shape. Mitchell AI, named explicitly after Robert Mitchell because Sarah wanted everyone who used it to know whose mathematics made it possible. A mobile app that learned how you used your phone and optimized everything accordingly. Battery life extended by predicting usage patterns. App loading accelerated by preloading based on behavior. Privacy preserved by processing everything locally instead of sending data to cloud servers. They beta tested with 1,000 users recruited through Helen's MIT network. The feedback was overwhelming. People who had never thought about AI or algorithms or the mathematics underlying their phone's behavior suddenly noticed their devices working better, lasting longer, respecting their privacy in ways they had not known to demand. Sarah put $5 million into the company, incorporated as Mitchell AI Inc., and filed for permits and business licenses and all the bureaucratic requirements that transformed an idea into a legal entity. David Brennan invested another $5 million for 20% equity, giving the company enough runway to build a real product and hire a proper team. The public launch was scheduled for March, 8 months after Sarah had first received the licensing agreements. She spent weeks preparing, working with a PR firm that specialized in tech startups, crafting messaging that balanced her father's legacy with the company's future, practicing presentations until she could explain complex technology in language normal people understood. 2 days before launch, Tom Richards called her directly. Sarah stared at her phone showing the TechCore CEO's name, debating whether to answer. Helen had warned her this moment would come. Marcus Cole had advised her to record the conversation. David said to listen carefully for what he did not say as much as what he did. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice carefully neutral. This is Sarah Mitchell. Sarah, Tom Richards. I hope you do not mind me calling directly. I know we have not met formally, but I feel like I know you through your father's work. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of friendly authority that suggested he was used to getting what he wanted through charm before resorting to pressure. What can I do for you, Mr. Richards? Please, call me Tom. I wanted to congratulate you on the success with Google and Apple. Impressive negotiation for someone new to the industry. And I hear you are launching a product next week. Mitchell AI. Clever branding. Thank you. Sarah waited, knowing compliments from competitors never came without ulterior motive. I also wanted to reach out because I think there is potential for partnership here. TechCore has been developing our own lightweight AI platform, as you probably know. Core AI launches next month. We have spent over $200 million on it. But I will be honest with you, Sarah. Your father's algorithm is better. The admission surprised her enough that she forgot to maintain her neutral tone. You are admitting your product is inferior? Tom laughed, the sound warm and self-deprecating. In private conversation, yes. Your father was brilliant. We offered him $50 million for exclusive rights because we knew his approach was superior to anything our team could develop. He said no, which I respected, even though it complicated our strategic planning. What do you want, Tom? I want to make you an offer your father should have accepted. $150 million for exclusive worldwide rights to the Mitchell algorithm. You keep your licensing revenue from Google and Apple, but you do not launch Mitchell AI, you do not license to anyone else, and you let TechCore integrate your father's work into our platform. We handle the business side, you walk away wealthy and successful, everyone wins. Except the billions of people who would benefit from competitive innovation instead of monopolistic control. Sarah felt anger rising but kept her voice level. Tom's tone hardened slightly. Sarah, you are about to make a very expensive mistake. Launching a competitive product against TechCore is not like licensing to partners. We will fight. We have marketing budgets larger than your entire company valuation. We have legal teams that can tie you up in court for years. We have relationships with distributors and carriers and app stores that can make your product invisible to consumers. Are you threatening me? I am explaining reality. Tom's voice returned to friendly reason. You are a talented engineer and clearly your father's daughter in terms of stubbornness. But you are not a business person. You do not understand how this industry works. Take the offer. Secure your family's future. Let professionals handle the commercialization. Sarah thought about her father dying broke rather than sell to Tom Richards. She thought about the journal entry where he had written that TechCore wanted to bury innovation they could not match. She thought about 8 months of unemployment and eviction notices and choosing between her children's needs because she could not afford both. No, the word hung in the silence that followed. Tom Richards took a long breath before responding. Then we will see you in the market. I hope you are prepared for what that means. The call ended. Sarah sat in her home office staring at the phone, her hands shaking slightly with adrenaline. She had just declared war on a company with $80 billion in market capitalization and a CEO who had made very clear he would use every resource to eliminate her as a threat. The product launch happened as scheduled. Press conference at a Seattle hotel, journalists and tech bloggers and industry analysts filling a room Sarah had rented with money that felt simultaneously like too much and not nearly enough. She stood at the podium in a blazer Helen had helped her shop for, looking out at faces that ranged from curious to skeptical to openly dismissive. This is Mitchell AI. Sarah advanced to the first slide showing the app interface clean and simple and deliberately unlike the cluttered experiences most AI apps offered. It is artificial intelligence that respects your privacy, extends your battery life, and learns how you actually use your phone instead of how advertisers want you to use it. It is built on my father Robert Mitchell's algorithm, mathematics he spent 30 years developing, while everyone told him he was wasting his time. She demonstrated the app running on a standard Android phone, showing how it predicted which apps would be needed and preloaded them, how it optimized battery usage based on learned patterns, how it processed everything locally without sending data to cloud servers. The room grew quieter as the demonstration progressed, journalists recognizing they were seeing something genuinely different rather than incremental improvement on existing technology. The pricing structure was deliberately provocative. Free for individual users with optional paid features. Enterprise licensing at rates 90% below what Google and Apple charged for comparable AI services. Open API for developers who wanted to build on the platform. Everything designed to maximize adoption and minimize barriers to entry. A reporter from TechCrunch asked the question Sarah had been expecting. TechCore launches Core AI next month with a massive marketing campaign. They claim it will make lightweight AI accessible to everyone. How can a startup with 6 employees compete with that? Sarah met the reporter's eyes. We are not competing with their marketing budget. We are competing with their technology. TechCore spent $200 million building an inferior product. My father spent 30 years building a superior algorithm. The market will decide which matters more. The room laughed, appreciating her directness. But Sarah knew the truth. Marketing mattered enormously in consumer technology. Brand recognition and distribution deals, and app store placement and carrier partnerships all created advantages that had nothing to do with technical superiority. TechCore could bury Mitchell AI under advertising spending even if their product was objectively worse. The first week after a launch brought 50,000 downloads, respectable for a no-name startup, but barely a rounding errors in an industry measured by hundreds of millions of users. Reviews were excellent, early adopters praising the performance improvements and privacy protections. Tech blogs wrote favorable comparisons, noting that Mitchell AI delivered on promises most AI apps made but failed to keep. Then TechCore launched Core AI with a Super Bowl commercial that cost $7 million. Celebrity endorsements, slick production values, a marketing blitz that put Core AI on billboards and bus stops and banner ads across every major website. Downloads exploded to 10 million in the first week, fueled by brand recognition and marketing saturation that made Mitchell AI's launch look amateur by comparison. But the product reviews told a different story. Tech journalists who actually tested both apps consistently ranked Mitchell AI as superior. Core AI was heavy, intrusive, demanded constant connectivity, drained batteries faster than advertised. Mitchell AI was light, respectful, worked offline, extended battery life measurably. The narrative began to shift. Articles appeared with headlines like David versus Goliath in AI and Why TechCore's massive marketing cannot hide inferior technology. The tech community, always quick to rally against corporate giants, embraced Mitchell AI as the underdog worth supporting. Downloads accelerated. Reviews went viral. Social media campaigns emerged organically with hashtags like Support Mitchell and Choose Quality. Sarah watched the metrics climb with a mixture of excitement and terror. Every new download was validation. Every positive review was vindication. But she also knew Tom Richards had not exhausted his arsenal. The marketing blitz was just the opening salvo. Worse would come. It came 3 weeks after launch. TechCore filed a lawsuit alleging patent infringement, claiming the Mitchell algorithm incorporated elements from research conducted by Neuralsoft employees, including Robert Mitchell during his employment there from 1998 to 2003. Since TechCore had acquired Neuralsoft's intellectual property in 2008, they argued, any work product from that period belonged to them. Marcus Cole called to explain the implications, his voice carrying the weariness of an attorney who had seen this play before. This is a delay tactic. They do not expect to win. They expect to freeze you in legal uncertainty long enough that enterprise customers choose Core AI over Mitchell AI because we represent unresolved legal risk. Every month we spend in court is a month they can consolidate market position. Can we fight it? We can and will fight it. Your father's documentation proves independent development, but documentation has to be validated through discovery and expert testimony and judicial review. That takes time, 18 months minimum, possibly 3 years if they appeal everything. Sarah felt the weight of it settle over her. 18 months of potential customers hesitating. 18 months of explaining to investors why legal uncertainty was manageable risk. 18 months of TechCore spending hundreds of millions to convince the market their inferior product was the safe choice. The team meeting that afternoon was grim. Engineers who had left stable jobs to join a startup suddenly faced the possibility that their equity would be worthless if the legal battle destroyed the company before it could achieve sustainable growth. The product manager who had believed in the mission wondered aloud whether fighting was worth the cost. Sarah listened to their concerns, understanding each one because she felt them herself magnified by the responsibility of having convinced these people to take risks on her vision. When they finished, she spoke with conviction she was not entirely certain she felt. My father spent 30 years building this algorithm while companies told him to quit, While family told him to be practical, while everyone said he was wasting his life, he did not quit. He died broke, but he did not quit. I will not dishonor his persistence by surrendering at the first legal threat. She paused, meeting each person's eyes. I understand if you need to leave. I will give everyone severance and good references and no hard feelings. But if you stay, I promise we will fight this together and we will win because the truth is on our side and because Tom Richards made a critical mistake. What mistake? The product manager asked. He assumed I was like him, that I would calculate the cost of fighting versus settling and choose the path of least resistance. He does not understand that some things have mattered more than money. She gestured to the laptop where her father's algorithm lived. This matters more, proving that innovation should serve people rather than control them. That matters more. Finishing what my father started. That matters more than anything TechCore can threaten. No one quit. The team returned to work, building features and fixing bugs and preparing for the next phase of growth despite legal storm clouds gathering. Sarah spent nights reviewing her father's documentation, preparing for depositions, working with Marcus to build the strongest possible defense. But she also spent time on something Helen had suggested. Going public with the story not just as marketing, but as truth-telling. The tech industry loved narratives about underdogs fighting monopolies, about innovation threatened by corporate bullying, about principles mattering more than profit. Sarah reached out to a journalist she knew from her Amazon days, someone who had covered her firing and understood the dynamics of speaking truth to power in tech companies. They met at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, Sarah bringing documentation she had never shown publicly. Her father's journals, the email exchanges with TechCore, the lawsuit that was transparently designed to delay rather than win. The article appeared in Wired 2 weeks later. The algorithm that threatens big tech, how one woman's fight for her father's legacy became a battle for innovation's future. It told Robert Mitchell's story, his 30 years of persistence, his death believing he had failed, his daughter discovering his life's work in a laptop everyone thought was worthless. TechCore's attempts to buy and then bury the technology. The lawsuit designed to eliminate competition through legal warfare rather than technical superiority. The response was volcanic. Social media erupted with support for Sarah and condemnation of TechCore's tactics. Downloads of Mitchell A. I jumped by 2 million in 3 days. Developers started building apps using the Mitchell AI API specifically to support the underdog. Enterprise customers who had been hesitating signed contracts explicitly because using Mitchell AI felt like taking a stand against corporate bullying. Tom Richards responded with a press conference claiming Sarah was conducting a PR campaign to distract from legitimate intellectual property concerns. His performance was polished and professional, hitting notes about protecting innovation and respecting patent law. But the narrative had already shifted. TechCore was Goliath. Mitchell A. I was David. The public had chosen sides. Sarah's mother called after seeing the article, her voice carrying emotions Catherine Mitchell had spent decades suppressing. I read what you wrote about your father, about his journals and his dreams and how the family treated him. I did not realize you were carrying all of that. I am not carrying it, Mom. I am finishing it. There is a difference. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Your brother called me yesterday. He saw the article too. He is angry. Says you made him look bad, made the family look unsupportive and cruel. Were we supportive? Sarah kept her voice level. Did we believe in Dad? Did we take his work seriously? Did anyone besides me think the laptop was anything other than worthless junk? Number Catherine's admission was quiet. We were not supportive. We did laugh. We did dismiss him. And you are right to tell that truth, even though it makes us look terrible. She paused. I am proud of you, Sarah, for fighting, for honoring your father, for not letting them bury what he built. The call ended, but Sarah sat holding the phone, processing her mother's words. Proud. Catherine Mitchell was proud of her. The daughter she had spent years comparing unfavorably to Brandon, the child who had made poor choices and struggled with consequences, the single mother living in poverty while the rest of the family maintained comfortable lives. That daughter was now the one making Catherine proud. Brandon's response came via email, his words sharp with hurt pride and accusation. You threw me under the bus to sell your product. Made me look like the villain in your hero story. Do you have any idea how that affects me professionally? People at Microsoft have asked if I really mocked you at Dad's funeral, if I really offered $500 for the laptop. You made me look like an asshole. Sarah read the email twice before responding. I told the truth. If the truth makes you look bad, perhaps you should consider why you chose actions that cannot withstand public scrutiny. Brandon did not reply. Sarah did not expect him to. Some relationships could not survive honesty, particularly when honesty revealed that positions of superiority had been built on foundations of unearned confidence rather than actual achievement. The lawsuit ground forward through depositions in document production and expert witness retention. Marcus Cole filed motions demonstrating Robert Mitchell's meticulous documentation of independent development. TechCore's attorneys responded with counter-motions claiming similarities between approaches suggested knowledge transfer had occurred regardless of documentation. Discovery revealed something interesting. Internal TechCore emails showing executives discussing the Mitchell algorithm months before filing the lawsuit, acknowledging they had no strong legal claim, but believing the litigation would freeze Mitchell. AI's growth long enough for core AI to establish market dominance. One email from a senior VP was particularly damning. We do not need to win in court. We just need to win in the market before the judge dismisses our claim. Marcus filed the email as evidence of bad faith litigation, arguing TechCore was abusing the legal system to eliminate competition. The judge scheduled a hearing to consider sanctions for frivolous lawsuit. TechCore's attorneys scrambled to explain the email as taken out of context, a misunderstanding of strategic planning discussions. But the damage was done. Tech journalists covered the revelation extensively. TechCore emails reveal lawsuit was market strategy, not legal claim. Public opinion shifted further against the tech giant. Enterprise customers, who had been waiting for legal resolution, began signing Mitchell AI contracts, calculating that even if TechCore somehow won in court, the likelihood was decreasing daily. Sarah stood in her office 6 months after launch, watching metrics that represented validation her father never received. 2 million active users, 40 enterprise customers generating $5 million in annual recurring revenue, product reviews averaging 4.8 stars, growth trajectories that suggested path to profitability within 18 months. But more than the numbers, she felt the weight of what was being built. Every user who chose Mitchell AI was voting for privacy over surveillance, for quality over marketing, for David over Goliath. Every enterprise customer signing contracts was betting that superior technology mattered more than corporate size. Every developer building on the platform was extending her father's vision in directions he had never lived to imagine. Helen Zhao visited Seattle for a board meeting, staying at Sarah's house, and spending evenings playing with Emma and Lucas, who adored their honorary grandmother with her sharp wit and refusal to condescend to children. One night after the kids went to bed, Helen and Sarah sat in the backyard drinking wine and watching stars emerge over the Seattle suburbs. Your father would be amazed, Helen spoke quietly, not just at the company or the revenue or the users, at you, at who you became when necessity demanded it. I do not feel like I became anyone. I feel like I just kept moving forward because stopping was not an option. That is what becoming someone means. Helen smiled. Transformation is not dramatic revelation. It is showing up every day when showing up is hard. It is continuing when quitting would be easier. It is finishing what someone else started because you understand the work matters more than who gets credit. Do you think we will win against TechCore? You have already won. Helen gestured at the house, at the life Sarah had built. Your children sleep in their own rooms in a house you own. Your company employs people and serves millions. Your father's algorithm is changing how AI gets deployed. Tom Richards can file all the lawsuits he wants. You have already won everything that actually matters. Sarah felt tears threaten and blinked them back. I want him to see this. I want Dad to know his 30 years were not wasted. He knew. Helen's voice carried absolute certainty. That is why he left everything to you. Not because you were the most successful child, or the most connected, or the most likely to get rich. Because you were the one who would understand that success is not about personal victory. It is about finishing something that matters. He knew you would do that, and he was right. The stars continued emerging, points of light in darkness, each one representing time and distance that made their glow seem impossible, yet there they were. Sarah thought about persistence, about light traveling across years to reach eyes that would appreciate its journey, about algorithms developed across decades finally reaching the world, about daughters finishing what fathers started. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. TechCore would continue fighting. Competition would intensify. Problems would emerge that she did not yet know how to solve. But tonight, sitting in her backyard with Helen beside her and her children sleeping safely inside, and 2 million people using technology her father had built, Sarah Mitchell allowed herself to feel something she had not felt since before he died. Certainty that the work mattered, that the fight was worth it, that finishing what he started was exactly what she was meant to do. And that victory was not a moment but a process, not an arrival but a journey, not defeating opponents but proving that persistence and principle could triumph when you refuse to let anyone convince you to quit. The lawsuit discovery process became Sarah's education in corporate warfare. For 9 months, she lived in conference rooms with Marcus Cole and teams of associates, reviewing 30 years of her father's documentation, preparing depositions, building the case that would prove Robert Mitchell's algorithm had been developed completely independently of any employer's resources. Every notebook her father had kept, every timestamp on code commits, every email exchange with colleagues became evidence in a legal battle that felt less about justice and more about endurance. TechCore's strategy revealed itself gradually through the grinding machinery of litigation. They were not trying to win on legal merit. They were trying to exhaust Sarah financially and emotionally to create enough uncertainty that customers chose their established product over her uncertain startup, to delay market competition long enough for core AI to become the default choice through marketing saturation and partnership deals. The pressure showed in metrics Sarah tracked obsessively. Mitchell AI's user growth had plateaued at 5 million, respectable but far short of the exponential curve needed to justify venture capital interest or sustainable business model. Enterprise sales had stalled at 40 customers, many of them explicitly citing legal uncertainty as reason for delay. Revenue was tracking at 8 million annually when projections had suggested 15 million by this point. The team felt it too. Engineers who had believed in the mission began receiving recruitment calls from Google and Amazon and Microsoft, offers that promised stability and equity in companies not facing existential legal threats. 2 left in month 7 of the lawsuit, both apologizing but citing families and mortgages and the need for certainty Sarah could not provide. She gave them generous severance and glowing references and tried not to feel betrayed by pragmatism she understood completely. David Brennan wanted to settle. He made his case over dinner at a restaurant Sarah could now afford but still felt uncomfortable in, surrounded by tech executives discussing valuations and exits and acquisition strategies in tones that suggested money was the only metric that mattered. TechCore will offer you $75 million to make this go away. David spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had navigated these waters before. You take it, you shut down Mitchell AI, you keep your licensing revenue from Google and Apple. You walk away with enough money that your children's children never need to work. That is a win, Sarah. Is it? Sarah moved food around her plate without eating. My father died broke rather than sell to them for 50 million. I would be accepting less than they offered him to do exactly what he refused to do. How is that honoring his choice? Your father did not have kids depending on him. David's bluntness was not unkind. He could afford to die on principle. You have Emma and Lucas to consider. You have employees who took risks based on your vision. Sometimes the responsible choice is taking the win that is offered, rather than gambling everything on vindication that might never come. Sarah thought about her children, about Emma now 11 and Lucas 9, about the stability they finally had after years of watching their mother calculate whether they could afford both dinner and electricity, about the house that was theirs, the school district that was excellent, the future that had opened when she signed those licensing agreements. But she also thought about the journal entry where her father had written that Sarah was the one who would choose right over easy, who would finish what he started because she understood some things mattered more than money. I cannot sell to them, David. I know it is the smart play. I know it is the safe choice. But I cannot look at my kids and tell them that when things get hard, when powerful people pressure you, when fighting costs more than surrendering, the right thing to do is take the money and quit. What lesson would that teach them? David nodded slowly, resignation mixing with something that might have been respect. Then we keep fighting. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. If we lose this lawsuit, if TechCore convinces a judge they have legitimate claim to your father's work, you lose everything. Not just the company, The licensing agreements will be voided because you will not have clear ownership to license. You will go from wealthy to bankrupt in a single court decision. I understand. I hope you do. Because I am betting another $5 million to keep this fight going, and I am doing it because I believe in you, not because I think the odds are good. David paused. Do not make me regret trusting you the way your father trusted you. The breakthrough came from Patricia Chen, the former Neuralsoft employee who had worked with Robert Mitchell in the early 2000s. She reached out to Marcus via email with the subject line, I have something that will help Sarah. Marcus called her immediately, listened to what she had, felt his pulse quicken with the recognition that sometimes cases turn on single pieces of evidence everyone thought was lost. Patricia had kept correspondence from her time at Neuralsoft, including a signed letter from the CEO dated April 2003. The letter explicitly acknowledged that Robert Mitchell's personal AI research was separate from company projects, developed on his own time with his own resources, with no claim from Neuralsoft to any intellectual property beyond what he created specifically for employer-assigned work. The letter was everything. It proved Robert had established independent ownership before leaving Neuralsoft. It demonstrated the company understood and agreed his personal research was his own. It destroyed TechCore's entire claim because when they acquired Neuralsoft's intellectual property in 2008, they acquired nothing related to the Mitchell algorithm because Neuralsoft had never owned it. Marcus filed the letter as evidence, along with a motion for summary judgment. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later in Seattle Federal Court, Judge Martha Brennan presiding, a woman whose reputation suggested she had limited patience for frivolous litigation designed to delay rather than resolve legitimate disputes. Sarah sat in the courtroom on the day of the hearing, flanked by Marcus and David, watching TechCore's legal team file in with the expensive confidence of attorneys who billed $800 per hour and treated courtrooms like stages where performance mattered more than facts. Tom Richards sat in the gallery, his expression carefully neutral, but Sarah caught him glancing her direction with something that looked like grudging respect. The arguments lasted 2 hours. TechCore's lead attorney, a woman named Rebecca Stone, who had successfully defended corporate clients in hundreds of patent disputes, attempted to argue that similarities between Robert Mitchell's algorithm and Neuralsoft's research suggested knowledge transfer had occurred despite the 2003 letter. She presented expert testimony claiming no one could have developed the Mitchell algorithm without building on Neuralsoft's foundational work. Marcus countered with Robert's 30 years of documented research, showing clear progression from early experiments in the 1980s through refinements in the 1990s to the breakthrough in the 2010s. He presented Helen Zhao's expert testimony, confirming the algorithm's unique mathematical approach bore no resemblance to Neuralsoft's methods. He walked the judge through the 2003 letter line by line, establishing that TechCore was claiming ownership of intellectual property that had been explicitly disclaimed by the company from whom they inherited it. Judge Brennan listened carefully, asked pointed questions that suggested she had read the briefs thoroughly, took minimal notes because she seemed to be forming opinions in real time. When arguments concluded, she took exactly 4 minutes to render her decision. The court finds that defendant has presented clear and convincing evidence that the Mitchell algorithm was developed independently of any employer's resources or intellectual property. The letter from Neuralsoft's CEO is dispositive. TechCore's claim relies on speculation, unsupported by documentary evidence. Summary judgment is granted in favor of defendant. TechCore's patent infringement claim is dismissed with prejudice, and defendant is awarded costs and attorney fees. The gavel struck. The courtroom erupted in controlled celebration. Marcus shook Sarah's hand. David hugged her. Journalists rushed out to file stories about the David versus Goliath victory. Sarah felt tears forming, but held them back, not wanting to cry on camera, not wanting this moment reduced to emotional reaction rather than legal vindication. Outside the courthouse, Tom Richards approached her directly, his security detail creating space for private conversation. Sarah tensed, expecting anger or threats or warnings about appeal. Instead, Richards extended his hand. You won. Fairly. Your father's documentation was better than our legal team anticipated. I underestimated you both. Sarah shook his hand, surprised by the gesture. What happens now? Now we compete in this market where we should have competed from the start. Richards smiled without warmth. Core A, I launches full version next month. May the best product win. It will. Sarah matched his smile. And it will not be yours. The dismissal of TechCore's lawsuit triggered a cascade of consequences that transformed Mitchell AI from promising startup to validated competitor. Enterprise customers who had delayed contracts signed immediately. Downloads jumped from 5 million to 15 million in 2 weeks. Revenue projections were revised upward. Venture capital firms that had been cautiously interested became aggressively competitive in offering funding. But Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including David Brennan. She did not take more VC money. Instead, she hired Jennifer Park as chief operating officer, bringing in someone with Google pedigree and operational expertise to build the infrastructure a rapidly scaling company required. She promoted her best engineer to CTO, trusting technical vision to someone who understood the algorithm intimately. She hired a CFO to manage finances that were becoming too complex for her to track personally. And she transitioned herself to CEO, the role she had never wanted but now understood was necessary. Not because she enjoyed corporate leadership or strategic planning or investor relations, but because the mission mattered too much to delegate to someone who did not understand why her father had spent 30 years building something everyone called impossible. The year after the lawsuit dismissal became a blur of growth that felt both exhilarating and terrifying on me. Mitchell AI hit 50 million in annual revenue, crossed 20 million active users, signed 300 enterprise customers, hired 60 employees across engineering, sales, operations, customer support, opened offices in San Francisco and Boston and Austin, became a real company with real scale and real problems that required professional management rather than scrappy improvisation. Sarah learned to be a CEO the way she had learned everything else in her life, through necessity and determination and refusing to let lack of experience become excuse for failure. She studied how other tech founders manage growth. She hired coaches who taught her how to run board meetings and motivate teams and deliver presentations that inspired confidence. She made mistakes that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and learned from them with the systematic rigor her father had applied to algorithm development. The board began discussing IPO. Investment bankers from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley presented valuations ranging from $2 to $3 billion if Mitchell AI went public with current growth trajectory and revenue metrics. Sarah listened to presentations about underwriters and road shows and lockup periods in institutional investor interest, understanding perhaps half of what was said, but trusting the advisors David had helped her assemble. Emma and Lucas were 13 and 11 now, old enough to understand their mother's work was important, even if the technical details remained abstract. Emma was fascinated by the ethics of artificial intelligence, asking questions about privacy and bias, and whether technology served people or controlled them. Lucas was building robots in their garage using the Mitchell AI algorithm, demonstrating that 8-year-olds could create autonomous devices if given the right tools and encouragement. One evening over dinner, Sarah asked them the question that had been circling her thoughts for months. How would you feel if Mitchell AI became a public company? If our wealth changed in ways that made us look different to other people? Emma considered seriously. Will it change how we live? Like, will we move to some mansion and start acting like rich people in movies? Not unless you want to. Sarah was firm. We will live however we choose to live. This house is good enough. Our lives are good enough. The money does not change who we are unless we let it. Then I think you should do it. Emma's logic was characteristically direct. Grandpa's algorithm should reach as many people as possible. Going public means more money to build more things. More things means more people helped. That seems like what he would want. Lucas asked the practical questions Sarah had anticipated. Does this mean we are going to be really rich? Like billionaire rich? On paper, yes. In reality, it means we have tools to do good work. It means we can help people. It means we have choices most people do not get. But it also means we have responsibility to use those tools wisely. The IPO process consumed 4 months of Sarah's life. Roadshow presentations to institutional investors in New York and San Francisco, and London and Hong Kong. Meetings with underwriters about pricing and allocation and messaging. Regulatory filings with the SEC detailing every aspect of the company's finances and operations and risk factors. Rehearsing answers to questions about competition and growth, and why anyone should believe a 3-year-old company could sustain valuations normally reserved for established enterprises. Sarah told her father's story in every presentation, the 30 years of persistence, The laptop everyone thought was worthless. The algorithm that solved problems the entire tech industry was chasing. The daughter who finished what her father started. Some investors responded to the narrative. Others cared only about revenue growth and market opportunity and whether the numbers justified the valuation. Sarah learned to speak both languages, to connect mission to metrics in ways that satisfied people who measured success in different currencies. The offering was priced at $42 per share, valuing Mitchell AI at $3.2 billion. Sarah's stake, 38% of outstanding shares, was worth $1.2 billion on paper. The number was absurd, disconnected from any reality she had inhabited for 33 years, a mathematical abstraction that suggested her life had value quantifiable in billions, but felt more like confirmation that her father's work had value others were finally recognizing. The opening bell on NASDAQ was scheduled for a Tuesday in December, exactly 2 years after the TechCore lawsuit had been dismissed. Sarah stood on the trading floor with Emma and Lucas beside her, both dressed up for the occasion, both understanding this was significant even if the mechanisms of stock markets remained mysterious. Helen Zhao had flown in from Boston. David Brennan stood nearby with his family. Marcus Cole attended with his wife, having become more than just an attorney over years of fighting together. The bell rang at 9:30 Eastern Time. Trading began at $45 per share, $3 immediately above the offering price, then jumped immediately to 52 as demand exceeded supply. By 10 o'clock, the stock had touched $67, volatility that made the underwriters nervous, but suggested the market believed in Mitchell AI's potential. By noon, it had settled around $64, up 48% from opening, giving the company a market capitalization approaching $7 billion. Sarah's personal net worth exceeded $2 billion. She owned a number that felt entirely fictional, that bore no relationship to lived experience, that suggested success measured in ways her father had never achieved, but had made possible through mathematics and persistence and trust placed in a daughter everyone else had dismissed. But the moment that mattered most came not during market hours, but afterward, when the journalists had left and the celebrations had wound down, and Sarah stood alone for a moment on the trading floor, looking at screens showing Mitchell AI's stock price stabilizing at $64 per share. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. "Congratulations, you proved everyone wrong. I am sorry for not believing in you. I am sorry for working against you. I am sorry for being exactly the person Dad hoped I would not become." Sarah read the message 3 times before responding. "Thank you, that means more than you know." A second text arrived moments later. "Can we talk? I need advice. From someone who understands what it means to keep trying after everyone tells you to quit." She smiled at that, recognizing her brother was finally asking the question he should have asked years ago. "Yes, we can talk." That evening, Sarah drove Emma and Lucas to visit their grandfather's grave. They had been before, but this felt different, more significant, like closing a circle that had opened the day Robert Mitchell died, believing he was a failure. The cemetery was quiet in the December dusk, late afternoon light filtering through bare trees, frost beginning to form on grass that would crunch underfoot. The headstone was simple, gray granite with black letters spelling out his name and dates and nothing else, because Sarah had not known what else to say when she first bought it. Now she knew. Now she understood what should have been written but never could be, because words were inadequate for containing the impact of one man's persistence across 3 decades. "We did it, Dad." Sarah spoke quietly, her children standing beside her, their presence testimony to the future Robert had enabled. "Your algorithm is in 3 billion devices. The company is worth $7 billion. We beat TechCore. We proved everyone wrong." Emma stepped forward and placed flowers at the base of the headstone. "Grandpa, I am going to MIT next year to study artificial intelligence ethics. Because of you. Because Mom kept fighting. Because you taught us that persistence matters more than easy victories." Lucas added his flowers beside his sister's. "I am building robots with your algorithm, helping kids learn coding, donating half my profits like Mom taught me. Because you showed us how to create things that help people instead of just making money." Sarah felt tears running freely now, not bothering to hide them, understanding this moment was earned through years of struggle her children had witnessed but never fully understood the cost of. She thought about the funeral where her family had laughed, where Brandon had offered $500 with casual contempt, where Catherine had sighed with familiar disappointment. They had all been wrong. Every person who doubted Robert Mitchell, who minimized his work, who dismissed his dreams as impractical foolishness. He had been right, the world had been wrong, and his daughter had proven it by refusing to quit when quitting would have been easier and more profitable and more accepted by people whose approval she had once craved. The journal her father had left arrived 2 weeks after the IPO, delivered by Patricia Chen, who had found it among boxes she had been storing from his apartment. Sarah opened it in her home office, reading entries that chronicled 30 years of persistence in the face of constant rejection, of refinement in response to failure, of unwavering belief that the work mattered even when no one else could see it. One entry, dated March 2020, stopped her completely. I will not live to see this algorithm reach the world. The doctors are clear about timeline, and I am realistic about odds. I have maybe 4 years if treatment goes better than expected, probably 2 if it does not. I am not afraid of dying. I am afraid of dying before ensuring this work survives me. Sarah is the one. She has Catherine's discipline and my stubbornness. She has been knocked down more times than her brothers and keeps rising. She lost her job for principle. She lost her marriage rather than enable destruction. She has raised 2 children in poverty without losing integrity. That is who I trust with this work. Not the successful son or the creative son, but the daughter who understands persistence. I am leaving her the laptop and the algorithm and the choice. Sell for security or fight for the mission. I know which she will choose. I know she will fight. I know she will win because she has already survived everything that should have broken her and refused to stay broken. If you are reading this, Sarah, it means you won. It means you chose right over easy. It means you finished what I started. Thank you. Thank you for being stronger than I managed to be. Thank you for proving that persistence and principle can triumph. Thank you for honoring my trust by becoming the person I always knew you could be. I love you. I am proud of you. I wish I could have stayed to see this, but I trust that wherever I am, somehow I know, somehow I see, somehow I understand that my work mattered because you made sure it mattered. Finish what I started, daughter. Then start something new that is all yours. Build the future I could only imagine. Be the person I always knew you were. Sarah read the entry until she had memorized every word, until her father's voice echoed through years with clarity that transcended death. He had known. He had chosen her intentionally, understanding exactly what he was asking, trusting that she would rise to meet challenges he could only imagine. She had proven him right. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, not without moments where surrender tempted more than persistence. But she had proven him right in the ways that mattered most. The algorithm served billions. The company employed hundreds. The mission continued expanding. And 2 children were learning that integrity and perseverance in finishing what you start mattered more than easy victories or inherited advantages. The future Robert Mitchell had imagined but never lived to see was arriving daily in small increments in large transformations, in smartphones that worked better, in batteries that lasted longer, in privacy that was protected, in enterprise systems that cost less and perform better, and democratized access to technology monopolies wanted to control. Sarah closed the journal and looked out her office window at the Seattle skyline, at the city where her father had died, broken unknown, where she had struggled to feed her children, where everything had changed because she opened a laptop everyone thought was worthless. Tomorrow she would announce the creation of the Robert Mitchell Second Chance Fund, $500 million to support inventors who everyone told to quit. Tomorrow she would begin the next phase of honoring his legacy by extending it to people whose dreams needed someone to believe in them. Tomorrow the future would continue arriving in ways her father had enabled and she had delivered. But tonight, alone with his journal and his words and the weight of $2 billion in stock she had earned by refusing to surrender, Sarah Mitchell allowed herself to feel what she had not let herself feel since the day he died. Complete and absolute certainty that her father had been right about everything that truly mattered, and that she had been exactly the right person to finish what he started. The announcement of the Robert Mitchell Second Chance Fund happened on a Monday morning in February, 5 years after Sarah had first discovered what her father had hidden in that laptop everyone thought was worthless. She stood in the workshop that had been converted into a museum, surrounded by tools and equipment, Robert Mitchell had used across 3 decades of building what everyone called impossible, the steady tick of the restored grandfather clock marking time that had finally caught up to his vision. 300 people filled the space that had once contained only one man's solitary struggle. Journalists and entrepreneurs and inventors who had applied for grants, MIT students and Seattle tech workers who wanted to witness what the press release had called the largest private innovation fund ever created by an individual. Helen Zhao sat in the front row beside David Brennan, both of them showing the particular satisfaction of people who had bet on someone when odds looked terrible and watched that bet exceed projections no one had dared articulate. Emma stood near the back with Lucas, both home from college for the occasion. Emma was 19 now, finishing sophomore year at MIT, studying artificial intelligence ethics, writing papers that questioned the same monopolistic tendencies her grandfather had fought against. Lucas was 17, running a robotics company he had started at 15 that now employed 12 people and generated $4 million in annual revenue, donating 50% to schools in low-income districts because his mother had taught him that privilege came with responsibility. Sarah stepped to the microphone and looked out at faces representing every stage of the journey, from funeral where her family laughed to this moment where she was about to commit $500 million to people whose dreams no one else believed in. My father died believing he was a failure. Her voice carried the confidence that came from 5 years of learning to speak truth in rooms where polite fiction was preferred. He spent 30 years working on an algorithm everyone said was impossible. He changed jobs 7 times because companies could not see value in what he was building. He died with $38,000 in the bank and a lifetime of people telling him to quit, to be practical, or to accept that some dreams are not worth the cost. She paused, letting that reality settle over people who had known success came easy or not at all. But he was not a failure. He was just early. He was solving problems the world had not yet admitted it needed solved. He was building the future before the present was ready to receive it. The only thing he got wrong was believing that success had to happen in his lifetime to matter. The fund parameters of Heartland were revolutionary in their simplicity. Grants ranging from $50,000 to $2 million with no equity taken, no control demanded, no strings attached beyond requirement to document work and share learnings with future recipients. Applications open to anyone with provable track record of attempting innovation, with preference given to inventors who had been fired, startups that had failed, dreamers dismissed as impractical. The selection committee included Helen Zhao, David Brennan, 3 Nobel laureates in science and technology, and Sarah herself. They would review applications quarterly and fund approximately 100 projects per year, creating a community of supported innovators who could focus on building rather than constantly scraping for resources. Sarah had already identified the first grant recipient, Patricia Chen, the woman who had kept her father's letter from Neuralsoft and provided evidence that destroyed TechCore's lawsuit, was 73 now and working on water purification system that could operate without electricity in areas lacking infrastructure. She had spent 16 years on the project using retirement savings and could not get traditional funding because target markets were too poor to generate venture capital returns. The Robert Mitchell Second Chance Fund was giving her $1.5 million to complete development and begin manufacturing, not because financial return was attractive, but because clean water in impoverished regions mattered more than profit margins. After the announcement, journalists asked predictable questions. How did it feel to give away $500 million? What did she hope to accomplish? What would her father think? Sarah answered with the directness that had become her trademark in an industry preferring corporate speak. It feels right. I hope to create the support system my father never had. And I think he would tell me I am finally understanding what he tried to teach me all along. That wealth is a tool, not a trophy. That success is measured in impact, not bank accounts. That the greatest inheritance is not money, but the example of living with integrity, even when it costs everything. The flood of applications that followed ranged from brilliant to bizarre to heartbreaking. Sarah read hundreds personally, stories of people who had sacrificed careers and marriages and financial security to pursue innovations they believed could change the world. Some were genuinely revolutionary. Others were well-intentioned but technically flawed. All shared the common thread of persistence in the face of doubt. One application stopped her completely. James Chen, 69 years old, had spent 42 years developing new approach to carbon capture requiring no external power source. He had been laughed out of 3 universities and fired from 2 companies for insisting on pursuing research his employers considered waste of resources. His application included a handwritten note at the bottom that made Sarah's throat tighten. I heard you speak about your father. I am someone else's father who will probably die before this work reaches the world. But maybe if I get support now, my children will not have to finish what I started alone. Maybe I can see it happen. That would mean everything. The selection committee funded his project with $900,000. 8 months later, preliminary results suggested his approach might actually work, might represent genuine breakthrough in addressing climate change through technology everyone had dismissed as impossible. Sarah visited him in his garage laboratory in Portland, watching this man who reminded her so much of her father explain complex chemistry with passionate intensity of someone who had never stopped believing, despite decades of rejection. His daughter was there, a woman in her 30s who worked as high school teacher and helped her father on weekends, who understood what it meant to watch someone you love be dismissed as fool for chasing what turned out to be wisdom. Does it feel like vindication? Sarah asked James as they stood amid equipment that looked like it belonged in science fiction, but was actually producing measurable results in carbon reduction. James considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. It feels like relief, not because I was right and they were wrong, though that is satisfying in ways I am not proud of, but because I do not have to die wondering if I could have made a difference if only someone had believed in me. Your fund gave me that. It gave me the chance to know instead of just hope. Those words stayed with Sarah for days afterward, echoing through her understanding of what the fund actually accomplished. Not just financial support, but validation that the work mattered, that persistence was not foolishness, that refusing to quit when everyone told you to was strength rather than stubbornness. The Mitchell AI company continued growing under Jennifer Park's leadership, while Sarah transitioned fully to board chair and foundation work. The company hit $420 million in annual revenue 3 years post-IPO, exceeding projections. Stock price climbed to $143 per share, more than tripling from IPO, giving the company market capitalization exceeding $14 billion. Sarah's personal stake was worth $4.1 billion on paper, a number that remained abstract despite years of reconciling to wealth that exceeded comprehension. She had sold minimal stock, just enough to fund the foundation and ensure financial security extending beyond her lifetime into children's and potentially grandchildren's futures. But wealth brought complications she had not anticipated. Distant relatives emerged claiming relationships she did not remember. Investment opportunities appeared daily in her inbox, each promising returns that would make billions into tens of billions. Charities solicited donations with increasing aggression. People treated her differently, carefully, as if enormous wealth made her fragile or dangerous or both. The hardest part was watching Emma and Lucas navigate world where their mother's success made them targets for assumptions about privilege and entitlement. Emma faced it at MIT, students who assumed her acceptance was bought rather than earned, who questioned whether her papers deserved high marks or just received them because of family wealth. Lucas encountered it in his robotics company, competitors who claimed his success came from access to resources rather than actual innovation. Sarah taught them what her father had never quite learned himself, that proving people wrong mattered less than doing work that mattered, that responding to assumptions with results was more effective than responding with arguments, that success built on actual achievement could not be diminished by others' doubts, no matter how loudly those doubts were expressed. One evening, Emma called from MIT, her voice carrying frustrations Sarah recognized from years of facing similar dismissal. A professor questioned whether I actually wrote my thesis or whether I had help from industry connections. He said it in front of the entire seminar. I wanted to scream at him that I earned every word, that being your daughter does not make me stupid or lazy or dependent on advantages. What did you do instead? Sarah asked, proud of her daughter for calling rather than reacting. I thanked him for the feedback and said I look forward to defending the thesis in front of the full committee where quality of work would speak for itself. Emma paused. But Mom, it hurt. It still hurts. Why do people assume wealth equals unworthiness? Because it is easier than admitting they might be wrong about what creates success. Sarah kept her voice gentle. Your grandfather faced this for 30 years. People assumed his failures meant he lacked talent rather than just lacked timing. You are facing the opposite. People assume your success means you lack merit rather than just have resources. Both assumptions are lazy thinking from people who would rather make judgments than do work of actually evaluating quality. How did you deal with it? I kept building. I kept proving. I kept finishing what I started even when people said I only succeeded because of Dad's algorithm. Emma heard the smile in her mother's voice. Eventually, the results speak loud enough that the doubters either admit they were wrong or reveal themselves as people whose opinions should not matter to you. The conversation ended, but Sarah sat holding her phone, processing how legacy worked across generations. Her father's persistence had enabled her success. Her success was enabling her children's opportunities. But each generation faced their own particular version of doubt and had to prove themselves in their own particular ways. Catherine called the next day, her voice carrying weight of revelation that had come slowly across years. I have been thinking about your father, about how I treated him, about what I did not understand until after he was gone. Mom, we have talked about this. Sarah kept her tone neutral, not wanting to revisit guilt her mother had already acknowledged. I know, but I need to say it again because I think I am finally understanding it completely. Catherine took a breath. Your father was not failing. He was building. Every job he lost, every startup that collapsed, every project that did not materialize was teaching him something that contributed to the final breakthrough. I thought he was repeating mistakes. He was actually iterating towards solution. Sarah felt tears threaten at her mother's hard-won wisdom. Yes, that is exactly right. And I punished him for it. I made him feel like he was letting the family down when he was actually building the future. I chose stability over vision and then blamed him for having vision I could not see. Catherine's voice broke slightly. I killed something in him, Sarah. Not his drive or his passion, but his confidence that what he was doing mattered. I made him die believing he had failed when he had actually succeeded beyond anything I ever accomplished. You did not kill him, Mom. His choices were his own. But I could have supported him instead of resenting him. I could have believed instead of doubting. I could have been the partner he deserved instead of the critic who made every setback feel like personal failure. Catherine paused. I am telling you this because I see Emma and Lucas facing assumptions about privilege, and I do not want them to internalize doubt the way your father did. I do not want my mistakes repeated across another generation. They are stronger than you think, Sarah said quietly. They have watched me fight and win. They understand that advantage is not the same as unworthiness. They will be fine. Because you taught them what I failed to teach you and your brothers. That persistence matters. That integrity cannot be compromised. That finishing what you start is more important than starting what looks impressive. Catherine's voice strengthened. Thank you for being the mother I should have been. For breaking cycles I could not break. For showing Emma and Lucas that success built on actual work cannot be diminished by others' assumptions. The 5-year anniversary of Robert Mitchell's death fell on a Tuesday in March. Sarah organized a gathering at the Workshop Museum, inviting everyone whose lives had been touched by her father's work. Grant recipients from Second Chance Fund, engineers who worked at Mitchell AI, students who had studied the algorithm, journalists who had covered the story, family members who had learned to understand what they had missed while he was alive. Over 400 people attended, the workshop overflowing into adjacent spaces, conversations sparking, and connections forming in ways that would have delighted Robert, who had worked alone for so long. Sarah stood amid the crowd watching her father's legacy take forms he could never have imagined, understanding that this was what success actually looked like. Not wealth or recognition or vindication, but community built around shared mission that outlived its originator. Helen Zhao gave speech about technical innovations Robert had contributed to artificial intelligence, explaining in accessible terms how his mathematical approach had been 2 decades ahead of current thinking. David Brennan talked about business lessons of patience and persistence, about how best innovations often require decades before markets were ready to receive them. Emma spoke about growing up, never knowing her grandfather but feeling his presence through her mother's choices, through the foundation's mission, through algorithm that bore his name and served billions. Lucas demonstrated robot he had built using Mitchell algorithm, small autonomous device that could navigate complex environments and make decisions without requiring constant cloud connectivity, exactly the efficient edge computing Robert had envisioned. Brandon stood without being asked, his voice shaking as he addressed the crowd. I was not kind to my father. I thought he was wasting his life chasing dreams that would never materialize. I thought practical success measured in job titles and salaries was what mattered. I was wrong about everything that actually counted. The room fell silent, everyone recognizing the cost of that admission. I have spent 3 years trying to build something my father would recognize as worthwhile, something that helps people instead of just generating profit. I will probably never know if I have succeeded at honoring his memory, but I know that trying is what he would want. Trying is what my sister taught me by refusing to quit when quitting would have been easier and more profitable. Catherine spoke last, her voice carrying authority of someone who had learned painful truths late, but learned them completely. I was married to Robert Mitchell for 30 years, and I did not understand him. I thought his passion was irresponsibility. I thought his persistence was stubbornness. I thought his dreams were delusions that hurt our family. She paused, emotion visible in tightness around her eyes. I was wrong about him, about what constitutes life well lived, about what legacy actually means. She gestured towards Sarah. My daughter understood what I could not see. She honored her father's work, not by protecting it, but by deploying it. She used his innovation to build companies serving billions. She transformed his wealth into foundation, supporting hundreds of inventors. She proved that practical choice is not always right choice, that sometimes greatest success comes from refusing to compromise vision even when everyone tells you to be reasonable. After speeches ended and crowd began dispersing, Sarah found herself alone in front of her father's restored workbench. Tools hung in precise order on pegboard behind it, each placed exactly where Robert had kept it, creating shrine to methodical craftsmanship. She picked up screwdriver worn smooth by decades of use, feeling its weight, imagining her father using this exact tool to build future everyone said was impossible. Her phone buzzed with news alert. Mitchell A. I had just been named one of Time magazine's most influential companies, cited for democratizing artificial intelligence, improving tech innovation could serve human needs instead of just maximizing shareholder value. The company her father's algorithm enabled was changing conversations about what technology companies owed society, about whether profit and purpose could coexist, about what responsibility came with power to shape how billions interacted with information. Sarah set down the screwdriver and walked to window looking out at Seattle skyline, where somewhere in those buildings engineers were working on projects that might be dismissed as impractical today but could change world in 20 years. Somewhere in that city were dreamers who everyone told to quit, who kept trying anyway, who needed someone to believe in them. The Robert Mitchell Second Chance Fund had committed $490 million to innovation projects over 5 years, funded 412 inventors across 43 countries, created network of supported dreamers who shared knowledge and encouraged each other through inevitable setbacks that came with attempting difficult things. 29 projects had resulted in commercial products now serving millions. 53 had produced research papers advancing human knowledge in meaningful ways. 8 had spawned new companies collectively employing over 3,000 people. And countless others were still in development, still being refined, still chasing breakthroughs that would justify years of persistence. Emma and Lucas found her at the window, both sensing their mother needed company, even if she had not asked for it. They stood together in silence before Lucas spoke with characteristic directness. Do you think Grandpa knows about all of this? About what you built from what he left? Sarah considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I do not know if there is afterlife where he watches or spiritual realm where he exists, but I know his work continues. His impact expands. His vision is being realized by thousands of people he never met working on problems he never imagined using mathematics he spent 30 years developing. In that sense, he is more alive now than when his heart was beating. Emma leaned against her mother's shoulder. That is good answer. Very philosophical. Very unsatisfying for people who want concrete certainty. Very much like Grandpa would have given. They laughed together, the sound carrying across workshop that had been transformed from one man's solitary struggle into gathering place for dreamers who refused to let doubt become destiny. As sun set over Seattle, Sarah Mitchell stood surrounded by tangible evidence that persistence mattered, that finishing what you started could change the world, that trusting someone with your life's work was greatest gift one person could give another. Her father had died believing he was failure, but he had also died trusting that Sarah would prove everyone wrong. She had kept that trust, not perfectly, not without mistakes, not without moments of doubt and fear and temptation to take easier paths. But she had kept it well enough to transform 15-year-old laptop everyone thought worthless into algorithm serving 5 billion people, company worth $14 billion, foundation supporting hundreds of inventors, and legacy that would outlive everyone who had ever doubted Robert Mitchell. The workshop lights flickered on as evening approached, illuminating tools and workbenches and grandfather clock that ticked steadily in corner. Tomorrow, Sarah would return to Foundation office and review new grant applications. Tomorrow, she would attend Mitchell AI board meeting and discuss expansion into markets still lacking access to efficient AI technology. Tomorrow, she would continue building future her father had imagined but never lived to see. But tonight, surrounded by people who understood what it meant to keep trying after everyone told you to quit, standing in space where her father had spent 30 years chasing what world called impossible, Sarah allowed herself to feel full weight of what had been accomplished. Not just money or company or recognition, though those mattered in their way, but something deeper and more permanent. The understanding that her father had been right about the only thing that truly counted. That work mattered more than wealth it generated. That integrity was worth preserving even when compromise promised easier paths. That legacy was measured not in what you accumulated, but in what you enabled others to build. Robert Mitchell had left his daughter laptop, algorithm, and choice. Sell for security or fight for mission. She had chosen mission. And in choosing it, she had discovered that security came not from avoiding risk, but from knowing you had tried to do something worth doing, that you had honored trust someone placed in you, that you had finished what someone else started, because you understood work mattered beyond any individual life or career or recognition. The gathering ended late that evening. People dispersed slowly, reluctant to leave, sensing they were part of something larger than memorial or celebration. They were witnesses to what persistence looked like when it succeeded after decades of being dismissed as foolish. They were participants in legacies still being written, still expanding, still proving that impossible was just another word for not yet accomplished. Sarah was last to leave, turning off lights and locking doors, performing small rituals of closing space that would open again tomorrow for visitors who wanted to understand how one man's 30-year journey from dismissal to vindication had changed world. She stood for a moment in darkness holding key to her father's workshop, feeling weight of everything it represented. Then she drove home to Modest House, where Emma and Lucas were probably already asleep, where tomorrow morning she would make breakfast and help with homework and drive them to school before heading to Foundation office to continue work. Her father had trusted her to finish. The laptop that started everything sat in climate-controlled case at Smithsonian now. Museum piece representing intersection of persistence and innovation, of family and legacy, of dying broke but leaving behind wealth that changed world. Visitors could see it there, could read placard explaining how this obsolete technology had contained algorithm worth billions, could understand in abstract terms what Sarah knew in her bones. That greatest inheritance was not money but trust. That most valuable legacy was not what you left behind, but what you enabled others to build forward. That success was measured not by a moment you stopped trying, but by impact that continued long after you were gone. Robert Mitchell had built the future. Sarah Mitchell had delivered it to world. And now 5 billion people use technology every day that existed because one man refused to quit and one woman refused to let his work die unfinished. That was the story. That was the legacy. That was what happened when you inherited not just algorithm, but responsibility to finish what someone else started, to honor trust with action, to prove that laptop everyone laughed about was exactly what it was always meant to be. The answer to everything. The proof that persistence and principle in finishing what you start could triumph when you refuse to let anyone convince you that impossible was anything other than not yet accomplished. The demonstration that wealth mattered less than work, that recognition mattered less than impact, that vindication mattered less than continuing to build something that served billions of people who would never know the name Robert Mitchell, but whose lives were incrementally better because he had spent 30 years refusing to quit. Sarah drove through Seattle streets toward home, her children sleeping in bedrooms that were theirs, her future secured by work she had completed, her father's legacy extended through foundation that would support dreamers for generations. The city lights blurred through tears she finally let fall. Tears for man who died too soon to see what his trust had enabled. Tears for journey from poverty to billions that had required every lesson struggle taught her. Tears for children who would never know their grandfather, but carried his persistence in their DNA and determination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities and new ways to extend mission. Her father had started and she had amplified. But tonight was for gratitude, for recognition that finishing what he started had been exactly what she was meant to do, for certainty that his choice to trust her had been vindicated in ways that transcended money or recognition or any measure except the one that actually mattered. Impact, legacy, work that continued long after the man who started it was gone, work that would continue long after Sarah was gone, carried forward by Emma and Lucas and hundreds of inventors supported by a foundation bearing Robert Mitchell's name, by billions of people using algorithm he developed, by future built on mathematics and persistence and refusal to quit that defined one man's 30-year journey from dismissal to transformation. The answer to everything was not the algorithm or the company or the billions of dollars. The answer was simpler and more profound than that. The answer was finishing what you start, honoring trust placed in you, refusing to let doubt or difficulty or dismissal convince you to quit when the work matters. That was what her father had taught her by dying and leaving her everything that mattered. That was what she had proven by living and building everything he had imagined. That was the real inheritance, the only one that actually counted.